Good afternoon. Thank you for joining the Pasco School Board of Directors this afternoon for an extended study session during our special meeting in replacement of our regularly scheduled board meeting. Our board meetings are always broadcast on Pasco. If you go onto YouTube and look for Pasco Schools, you can watch recordings of these board meetings, or if you watch Charter Cable TV channel 191, you can also see our board meetings. Everyone here on the board is excited this afternoon. We got our results certified from the school bond, and the bond has passed. So we as a board and we as a district would like to thank our community builders who helped us come up with the plan, and also the Pasco Citizens for Better Schools, the PAE, and all of our citizens who helped spread the word to the community on what we needed. As you know, we as board members aren't able to use our titles or influence to convince people to vote yes, but other groups help with that. So we appreciate all the time and effort that went into getting this bond to pass by community members and citizens, both for this bond, our past bond, levies, everybody who does this. We have a levy coming up, and we would encourage anyone who I guess I won't say that. We encourage people to be involved with our schools, and we thank them for all the support that they give us. Our special meeting this afternoon is to talk about WASDE and what we learned at WASDE. WASDE is the Washington State School Directors Association, and we have an annual meeting that rotates between Bellevue and Spokane. So several weeks ago, 3 board members here and Miss Whitney and Ms. Thornton, and a couple students, student board representatives, and other students from the district were able to go and talk about topics that affect boards in Washington State, both at the Washington State level, federal, local level issues. And usually we don't, as a board, have a time to get together and digest all these topics. We kind of feed them to the superintendent as board members individually, and they get incorporated into future agendas and the work that the superintendent does. So this year we decided to have a special meeting, talk about what we learn. The benefits of this will be, as a board, we're not going to give specific direction to the superintendent at this point. We're not going to take action on any items, but through our conversation and through our discussions, Ms. Whitney and her staff will be able to take snippets from our conversation out of that, and it will help the officers, the board president and vice president, come up with future agenda items and lead the board in the work that they do and the work that Ms. Whitney does for the district. So with that long-winded description of where we are here, we have an outline that we came up with of topics in front of you. The topics are facility planning, equity, boardsmanship, supporting the whole child, board annual work plan calendar, the impacts of McCleary and House Bill 2242, bargaining. So those are topics that board members who attended came up with and went to sessions on these topics and board members have said that they'd like to discuss them. So we put this into this outline, gave an approximate timeline to discuss each topic. So we'll start this first topic and we'll try to wrap it up by 5:15. And at 5:15, actually we'll try to go equity also till 5:45, and then take a brief recess to get some dinner at that time. So again, we're starting with facilities planning. Those members who didn't attend WASDE, if you have topics that you thought of or stuff that's applicable to the discussion, feel free to talk about that. And if there's stuff on here in facilities planning that a board member that attended would like to discuss another session that's not listed on here, feel free also. It'll be open discussion here. So again, the first topic, facilities planning. Several of us went to Vancouver School District presentation. They just passed a $500+ million bond, and they talked about how they got community buy-in on that, the process that they use to get community buy-in, and the process that the district can use before the board takes action to communicate to the entire community what they need, so that when it comes time for the board and the district to hand it over to the volunteer groups, there's not so much on the shoulders of the volunteer groups and and the communications department for Pasco School District. That message has already been communicated. There's just a little bit of work left there. We got a Highline school district approach process, community surveys, and we have the city and county role in long-term planning. So that's just a upper tier discussion there, and I'll open it up to board members to discuss sessions that they went to or other information that they have applicable to facilities planning.
Well, I am just grateful that our facilities, is that even working? That our facilities planning is going to be very different because of this bond passage. So it's going to make it a lot simpler and more. We'll be able to reach our goals a little bit better. So there's so many people here that had a huge impact on that bond passing, and so I want to publicly thank you and all of those that couldn't be here. This was a huge team effort, and every little bit helped, and so we just appreciate all of your efforts. And I feel like we should, applaud the thing passing. It's so exciting. So we're all coming off that high, and it's so fun to do facilities planning first when we have a bond passage in front of us and not a failure. So that's awesome.
So looking at the Mr. Christensen might have something to say here. He and I attended the Vancouver School District approach and process, and my brief summary of what I got out of that presentation was they communicate to their community all day, every year as to what their needs are, and they're able to put out, they hire a firm that's able to put out surveys, and it's part of their normal operating process. Surveys about what the community thinks they need, how things are going, and from that, the district staff, I think, takes that information and they come up with what they think the bond should be. But there's community input the entire time. Instead of waiting until right before a bond and then trying to put a survey out there and getting PDC violations and stuff like that, you make it more part of your normal operating process. Again, and their staff is the educational experts here, so they're not going to the community and saying, what do you guys think we need? They've gotten to a point to where this process works, and the community will trust that the staff will make the right decision. And another thing I got out of it is through these surveys and through the community conversations and support that they have, they were going to run the bond for like $330 million, I think they said. And just through the surveys they had and their conversations with the community, they knew that it was going to probably fail before they ever run it. So they said, instead of just throwing something out there within 6 months or a year, they said, we got to slow down. We got to go slow to go fast. We got to figure out what we really need. And also not just what we need. We think we know what we need, but we need to communicate with the community and tell them what they need. So they did that for a year and a half. And by that time, they had communicated enough with the community. They said that they thought they could run over a $500 million bond and have over 65% yes votes. So they ended up doing that. But again, their message to the group was sometimes you have to slow down on these bonds, slow down to go fast. And you might think that you're going to get behind the 8 ball, but sometimes if you communicate well enough, you can convince your community what you need, and you might be able to run a bigger bond than what you think. And I think there's several board members who have said different parts of that at different times, run bigger bonds and slow down to go fast. So that's what I got out of it.
So the good news is we've passed a bond. We don't have to, at least not in the short term, we don't have to go try and figure out what the community will support. A couple of things that I would add to that, or not necessarily add, but just agree with, or just is that they got community buy-in, but I believe when they went out to the community, they had kind of identified where their needs were and as far as capacity was. What they did do, though, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Scott, because I didn't make it wasn't there at the very beginning. But I think where they got the community involvement was what do we want our buildings to look like? What are we going to how do we want this educational environment to be? And so the community was invested in that way, not necessarily in where's our greatest need, because the district was on top of that. And I don't remember if it was in this session, I don't think it was, but I don't remember which one it was in, where they said they had a standing enrollment committee where they were tracking enrollment of every school all the time. And it wasn't just the district, although the district is involved in that, but a standing committee where they're identifying needs on a continual basis. Another thing, so this is Vancouver School District. As Scott said, they were going to run a bond that was $150 million less than what they actually ran and passed. And their initial feedback was that it wouldn't pass. So they said, we've got to engage our community. And when they did and went out to them and got their input and their feedback and their buy-in on this bond, they passed a bond for $150 million more than they were expecting and passed it easily. Another thing that he talked about that I think we have got to incorporate, this bond, so their growth is different than ours. We've grown at 2 and 3% a year, year after year. Theirs has been less than 1%. So they get 150 new students a year. And so their growth is not like ours. But when they set their bonds up, or this particular bond, they added 9 cents per thousand for the next 3 years, and then it was level after that. So there was virtually no increase. I think they said it's $20 a year for the first 3 years for the average house in our community, and then after that there's no increase, because they must have had a bond dropping off, and they were able to structure their bond so that there was no increase in funds. And so it was an easy calculation for the community to see that there was no really new taxes other than the $20 a year on their average home. So that was a help too, and I think there's some lessons there that we can learn in how we structure our bonds. And then there's some, okay, so this was Highline too, right? So we're going to talk about Highline as well.
So can I just ask how they structured their community involvement? So what did they do to get their community involved?
Go ahead, Steve.
So I'm not sure exactly how it initiated, but I think they had put together a plan. There was something like 19 sites in 2 weeks or something like that. Went out.
At the end, yeah.
And I think they had identified what they needed and where their needs were. There was a couple of key things that they said is we went to every community, not just one part of it where the need was. They said we did something in every, I don't know if you said every building or every area. Improvement, all sites. He said sites. So, but they did something everywhere. But I think their biggest buy-in or biggest engagement of the community was, what do we want these modifications to look like? It's not where do we need the space now. It's because they had determined that. But how can we make this environment a good learning environment for all of our students? And I think that sounded to me like where they had their most success in getting their community involvement.
And I heard similar to what Steve said. They had hired a firm out of Portland, but there's other firms available to do this again. But just constant communication, constant surveys with the community, and constant education on here's what we need. Here's, we have, and they have nowhere near as many portables as us. We have 10 portables, they say. We need to, build some schools. We have a 40-year-old building. We need to replace it. We have a 50-year-old building. We need to replace it. They didn't have anywhere near, from what I see, the dire need for space that we have. But they were able to, just through constant communication, constant surveys back and forth, going to the schools before they even talked about, running the bond, telling their community what they needed, and the community had accepted that they are educational experts and they do know what we need. And then they got involved. I think the superintendent said he went to and worked really hard, much like our superintendent does, went to like 60 presentations in 2 weeks to service organizations. So a lot of the same stuff we do, just over an 18-month process of education.
Written communications out to the public, is that what they did, or like on our Facebook page?
No.
Or-
Actually going and talking to people too.
Yeah,
at
face-to-face
schools.
meetings in the buildings. That's,
Okay.
and again, I think it would be worth, so fortunately, we have a bond now. We've got, we've got to decide going forward. We've got some decisions to make,
Right.
but,
What we're gonna
but
do
it,
going forward.
yeah, but it would be worth talking to them and getting more than just us sitting there in a presentation. But one of the things he did say, and this was said in a couple of other sessions too, is surveys, as long as you make them part of your regular, routine, ongoing business, you can run surveys that get a lot of different information. But if you wait until you want to run a bond and then run a survey, then you get a little crossways with the PDC. So it's, I mean, interesting information there that we can use surveys, and there's different schools that do it different, so different districts, I should say. So some let their bond committee or their community committee do it, and they'll pay for it and get that information, and there's nothing that prevents them from doing that. But it can't be the school district that's doing it unless you do it
Part of
on a
normal
regular
business,
basis.
yeah.
Well, I know that, going back when we built Chiawana, or when we were talking about Chiawana, I mean, that was a huge no way in Pasco that we were gonna build a new high school. And so it was the community groups that we got together and said, okay, and there was over 100 people at those meetings, and we had several of them.
Yeah.
So what if we built a new high school? How would you want that to look like? What would you want there? What would you want in the school? What would your expectations be? And we did that for several months, and that's how Chiawana
Yeah.
became a reality.
And the second high school in a community is infinitely harder than a third.
Right.
We've heard that again and again, because splitting the community in half is so difficult. They just don't, it's their identity, and they don't want to be apart. And so I think it's going to be easier for us to build that third high school than it was to build Chiawana in a lot of ways. But I think that what you learn from that is that, we need to involve a lot of people, and we need to get their ideas on how to do it best. And hopefully it'll be a little bit easier process this time. The survey piece is critical. And the different things that I went to across the board, I don't know, I probably need to talk into this. What I heard again and again is, first of all, you need good questions. They need to be, anyway, sometimes surveys are too hard to read, and sometimes they don't get the information that we need. So it's really important to do surveys often, like Steve said, and make sure that it's a regular part of doing business in Pasco. The other thing that I heard again and again was, it is critical that you get results sometimes from every parent in the district. And they said that getting the last, in one piece was 2 men who had just studied different districts all over, and a lot of what they did was just theoretical. They hadn't lived it, but they found that districts that got up to 90% of their surveys, it was the last 20% changed the results of the survey drastically. So it's really critical that we get out there and get, almost every household to return a survey, because we're going to get a lot more accurate information if we can do that. And so there was a lot of things about how to incentivize returning those surveys. Sometimes incentivizing kids, parents, and different places that they can do it. So I think surveys needs to be a part of how Pasco does business, and I think we need to make sure that we have really good surveys.
So the title of the presentation was an equity and excellence vision for future-ready school facilities, and they said to create a shared vision for future-ready school facilities, Vancouver Public Schools completed an 18-month stakeholder engagement, and it goes on from there. But when they were they were talking about future-ready schools and equity. Equity was a key word at all of WASDE this year. Probably 60+% of all presentations had the word equity and focus on equity. And one thing they said about running these bonds is, you want to put something on it for everyone. And they said also, and it made me start thinking, like, they said having 8 portables at one school and 0 portables at another is not equity for us. And they said we never buy portables, we just lease them. But it made me start thinking about what we have, and just as a board, we should think about it once we build these new schools and we're rebounding. Is equity having at a school that's built for 400 more kids worth of portables, and then another school that has 800 students with no portables? Or what do we need to figure out as a board to figure out what's equitable as far as having overcrowding in the support facilities at each of our schools? And I don't know the answer, but several of the things they talked about there were making sure that part of equity is not having a disproportionate amount of portables at one given school. So passing this bond gives us a nice opportunity to have those discussions and figure out what we need to do across the district when the rebounding issues come up there. But again, yeah, they said we never buy a portable. We only lease, because if you buy them, the community thinks they're permanent. And me and Steve were sitting there going, we've seen it. And he didn't say this explicitly, but I started thinking, and I'm going, well, yeah, if he had 220 portables, he could go out to his community, and that's another part of the education process. Or if we had 220 leased portables, and you're telling the community that I'm spending this many dollars, every year in rent, it's easier to go and build a bond or to get support for that bond versus saying, well, we have these portables, they're permanent now, we don't want to get rid of them. That's some people's feelings. So that's one thing they said, they never buy a portable, they only lease.
You can lease? I didn't even know you could lease a portable.
You can lease, but again, their growth rate is 150. Their district is 24,000 or something like that, and their growth rate's 150 students. When you're Pasco and your enrollment is 15,000 and you're growing at 500 a year, you don't. Well, I guess you could lease portables, but it'd be a long-term lease. So, but anyway, that's just some.
It's interesting too. I think it's important to realize that we think Pasco, and you see these places that have much bigger populations than Pasco, but they have smaller amounts of kids in the school district. The amount of kids to parents in Pasco is probably one of the highest in the state. So that's really important to see. Pasco, I believe, is one of the top 12 biggest school districts, or top 14 in the state of Washington. We're in a totally different, things look very differently as a large school district, middle-sized school district, and a small school district. And we're in a totally different league now, and we have one of the biggest school districts in the state of Washington. Do you remember how many school districts that were in the state? 295?
295.
Okay, so 295, and I believe I know we're at least in the top 14 of that number. So that's an impressive number for a city the size of Pasco, which I doubt is in the top 14 in the size of our city in the state.
This is a great discussion. I wasn't able to attend WASDE. I had a work commitment that week, but I'm happy to discuss these issues, and I think these are topics that we need a good discussion on, and I appreciate you sharing what you learned from them. I have a couple thoughts on facilities, and like Ms. Phillips, I wanted to thank everyone that did anything, anyone that voted yes or did anything to promote the bond. If we look at, this is really, I think, the best example or the best learning opportunity, really looking at this, because as has been mentioned, Vancouver, I'm all for gleaning some things from their process, but they're a completely different situation, right? They barely are growing considering their size, and we're in a completely different situation where we're growing dramatically still, and we're years and years and years behind in building. So with that in mind, with this past bond, many people said that couldn't be done. This was a $100 million bond that many people in our community felt was impossible, that nothing's ever happened like that. Nothing that large has ever been passed. Nothing like that's ever been proposed. And But our community said something similar to what Vancouver. They said, no, I mean, if we're going to run a bond, let's do a bond that actually starts addressing some of our issues. And I heard that again and again as I visited schools and community members. So we heard the last time around they wanted a fourth middle school, and so we listened and put that on it, and by golly, the darn thing passed. So the key points, which I think we did that they've done, is that we listened to the community this time. We got a little bit more bold and said, you know, okay, this is what's been done before. I don't know what their biggest bond, did they mention their biggest previous bond prior to that? But
I don't remember.
yeah, but this was by far the largest we'd ever run. And so it was just invigorating, I think, for our community to have such a successful large bond. Another take-home point for me, in that our community is different than others. I don't know if Vancouver or other communities have such a robust opposition to their schools as we do in Pasco. I bet you we lead the state in PDC complaints, in contrarian information, perhaps false information. I would be willing to bet, I would love to see those numbers. I bet we lead the state in the number of those types of complaints from people that are just absolutely opposed to our schools, just in general. So one thing I'd like to see, and I don't know if Vancouver mentioned this, but I'd like us to take a more proactive approach in addressing false information, in addressing opposition that is really trying to sabotage the future, our schools and our children's future. And I think in our community we've sat idly back too far and just relied on members of the bond committee to just do that for us. As school board members, we are, as President Lammer mentioned, we can't use school board resource or school district resources or time to promote the bond, but we can individually, on our own time and resources, do anything we want to promote the bond. And I think that's something that hasn't been done in the past that we need to do with every single bond and levy. We have the most knowledge of the need. We are heavily invested. Many of us have children in the schools, and if we're elected leaders, we need to take that leadership role and actually use our personal resources to promote these types of things and not rely on just everyone else to do it when we have the most knowledge of this type of thing. So I'd like to see not only us as school board members, but as our city council, other community leaders, to take a more proactive, vocal role in supporting and promoting our schools to our community. And I think if we do that, we're going to find even more success going forward.
So just a couple more things that from Highline. So one of the things that Highline does, and I think this is something, so we couldn't run a $500 million bond. We couldn't run a $200 million bond. I'm not sure. We could probably run a $150 million bond, or could have run a $150 million bond, but that would be the cap. So we're never going to run a big bond that builds us out of this in a single bond. One of the things that Highline does is they're on a 4-year bond and 4-year levy cycle. They run them in November, and I don't know if this is their slogan, but this is their practice, is when you elect a president, you vote for schools, both a bond and a levy. And I think that might be something worth looking at for us. When we do it, it is certainly a discussion we can have, but I think we, especially in the position we're in, we're going to have to do something. It's going to take several bonds for us to build out of this. And I think if we schedule it on a regular schedule, and then if we structure our bond repayments so that it favors that schedule, then we'll have a lot more chance for success. So,
Have they ever had a bond fail? I'm just curious.
Vancouver?
Highline?
I don't know. Did they say?
I believe that they did. I believe because we were in the same session,
Yeah.
and I think that approach was born
Do you
out
wanna
of
talk into the mic?
out of a previous failure.
Did you guys have the the number off that one? I might want to go back and look at the.
It was
That's all right if you
Saturday
don't.
morning, 9:45, I think.
Thank you.
And I don't remember if it was a session, but I think this is the part to talk about it. So one of the things I think we have to get better at as a board is meeting with our city council. We are going to, well, they are going to have to approve another
Capital facility.
impact fee, right? So that's coming up, and somebody has a joint, like a regular joint meeting with their city council, and I don't remember which session it was I heard this in, but that might be a good idea for us to meet with them and just share ideas of where we're going, what we're doing, and find out what their plan is too, so.
And you know, we just passed this bond, and so we're building a new middle school. We have property that's bigger than what we need for an effective middle school. I think this is a great time to get together with the city. What are your needs? You know, what are your plans? Do you need a park? Do you need this? If we could go in and make a facility that's even better, I think it'll be better for the community as well as the schools, and sharing some of the costs with both will probably reduce costs on both sides of the table, because we are sharing costs rather than incurring costs at the same time. So I think it's critical to do that. I just talked with the city council meeting member that just was elected just recently. I've talked to several. They're all very willing to work with the schools. And he said, we've got to form a better partnership with our schools. And I think that is critical. And maybe what we should do is to have a board member that is appointed or volunteers to go to, you know, the city council meetings. I don't know how we want to do that, but I think it would be really good to do that.
Well, especially now with the new city council, new redistricting, I think there's several new people on that, on the council, so it would be,
5 of the 7, I think.
yeah, so it's a great time to reach out and connect with them.
Yep.
Scott, the number
So-
on that Highline session was 407.
407, thank you. So for those board members that weren't able to attend, they can go down and download the WASDE app, and then most of the presentations are on there as well, on the website as well. Yeah, Miss Whitney, if you could look into that with the city manager, into what that might look like, or think about it yourself before you talk to the city, and let us know. As Mr. Christensen alluded to, there'll be some new faces on the city council and lots of change, and sometimes that's a good time to start new practices.
Yeah, I love that idea, Ms. Phillips, and I think I've got them all off the top of my head. So the 5 new members are Blanche Barajas, Pete Serrano, Craig Maloney, Ruben Alvarado, and David Milne, and Matt Watkins and Sal Martinez were retained. And I'd be happy to volunteer. I wouldn't be able to go to all their meetings, but I'd be happy to meet and form some of those connections. I think that's a great idea, and I've talked to some of them as well.
And maybe a committee would be better, because a committee of the board means 2 members, because you can't have 3. And so having a committee so that you can tag team and talk
Yeah.
about it might be
Sure.
helpful.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up the impact fees. I mean, that's an area I think where we're really not getting what we should be, considering the impact of that. The impact fees, it's really a tiny portion of what should be given. And if I remember right, we had like the homeowners president or whatever they call them, come and really give us well, you don't want to raise this, and things are going to slow down, and that didn't happen. And so it was very disappointing. And so we're really under receiving what we should, considering the growth, and the growth hasn't slowed down, which they said it would, and we knew it wouldn't. And so I think that's something that needs to be readdressed as well.
Does anybody else want to talk about facilities planning topics that either you heard about at WASDE or that you've been wanting to talk about with the board?
Well, know we mentioned in the past, a long-term facilities plan. I think that's great, and I'm not sure what our timeline is now. This kind of took over the bond, but I like Mr. Christensen's idea of, let's kind of have a schedule and an outline and a plan. Obviously, that gets thrown off if you have a bond fail or if the economy collapses, like in 2008. I'm all for having a good, solid plan, especially to get us out of the hole, because like President Lehrman said, we have a dire need for space here that probably most other districts don't have in our state, but I'm all for having a good plan and having an idea of when we're going to run the next bond. And we already have voted on the levy in February, but having a plan, realizing that that's going to have to be constantly readdressed, given the circumstances. Growth projections are different. A bond may not pass, the economy collapses, whatever happens, we have to adjust it. But I think we need to, and the community is ready to kind of get an update on that. Okay, now what's the plan this passed? So what is the plan going forward with the long-term facilities?
So Ms. Reyes or Ms. Whitney can correct me if I'm wrong as I speak here, but Ms. Reyes is right now she's been contacting each of the board members to talk about long-term facilities plan and the community builders going forward, taking input on that. So several of you have provided some input to her on that. As mentioned earlier, the first community builders meeting after the bond here is coming up on December 7th. So she'll start being the district lead in that area for us, and your charter is to help us come up with a long-term facilities plan. And part of that discussion, I would assume, would be what do a bond, and this is also for the board, but with the community, what a bond and levies look like, what would our community support want to see? Those kind of conversations will be happening. And I would assume eventually, maybe not in the next week or two, but in the next month or two, you'll have some kind of schedule that you'll be able to share with the board and with the district as to what the community builders schedule looks like going forward in order to get to the 10-year plan or 20-year plan that we're working towards.
Correct. That is what we're hoping to accomplish, and we look forward to providing regular updates to the board.
Okay.
Doesn't seem to be
First of which is tentatively scheduled for the 12th of December.
right.
Upon approval of officers and things.
Does that answer the question at a high level, Dr. Richardson? Okay. Anybody else on facilities planning? Okay. Next, we'll move on to equity. Again, as I mentioned, over 50% of the topics had the word equity in it. It was a big buzzword or a big keyword at this session of WASDE annual conference this year. And I think it also is at the national level at our NSBA, National School Board Association. So there's several topics bulleted out here, and I'll just open it up for the board to talk about equity, what they learned, what they want to learn, and anything else related to equity at this time.
Most of the sessions that I went to were about equity, and what the biggest thing that Morgan, Jod, and I took away from it was every student has different needs, and we need to address those needs. And we're gonna present more about that on our next board meeting.
Yeah, I heard a lot about equity and went to a several-hour thing on poverty and the effects, and we had to take on a role of poverty, and we were given the chance to. I was a 20-year-old single mom, and anyway, had to play out this whole thing. It was really interesting as we. They structured it where you had, whether you were in work or school or what you had to do and daycare, and I mean, they called CPS on me because I didn't pick up my child because I was in the line for getting food, and it closed before, and they were there, and I got there right as they closed. Anyway, it really hit me how difficult life can be and the things that you're trying to do just to survive, and how difficult it is. And so when I piggy that back the experience I had there and went to some of these school districts that have like really high poverty levels. Some school districts are higher than others, and we are a high poverty school district. And the poverty is based on free and reduced lunches. So it's not a perfect number, but that's what the whole state bases it on. So that's how we compare it. But one of the things that I learned was even things like field trips are something that we need to make sure that we do equitably across the board. You know, if we're giving our highly capable kids more field trips than whatever, or this school gets more field trips than this school, it's important that, you know, one of the goals in this one was every single student will get, and in the elementary level will get at least one field trip. Another one was that no student will be required to pay for them. I think that we've gone into that with, one of the schools got rid of the school lists entirely. I mean, they didn't require kids to bring anything to school, any kinds of colors or anything. They didn't even send home the list, and they actually had budgets for the teachers. And they gave all of the elementary budgets the same amount of money, and I think it was $5 per child to buy, 25, excuse me. 5 wouldn't go very far. $25 per child to buy those supplies, and they cut that out of the budget so they didn't have to deal with that. I'm not sure I want to go there, but I do. What did you say?
We've basically done that in our district.
Well,
Sometimes those letters are still sent out.
We still send the letters out. I still got 3 letters and I had children in 2 different schools. So I'm not even opposed to still getting that. I don't mind helping my children out. I don't mind helping the school out, the district out, however that works. But the schools that I went to, at least, kids come with a lot of stuff. But to make it a financial burden on some of the families, I think is, you know, it's something that we can make more equitable. Another thing that was brought up that I had never even heard before was the gender gap, and there were a couple of school districts that targeted not just the gap between poverty, low poverty, high poverty, or different races. They target the gap between males and females typically do a lot better in school than males. And schools are geared more toward that. And as they've targeted this gender gap and helping our male students to close that gap, it talked about, you know, more hands-on type learning and some different learning things that can help change that. So that was another interesting way to look at equity that I haven't seen before. And I think as we gear more toward making sure our kids are ready for whatever they want to do in life, career ready, we offer more technical things, more hands-on things, I think it'll help all kids do better. And I think with this new 24 credit thing, if we get to where we can provide 32 credits to our kids, we are going to be able to give them a lot more opportunity and a lot more hands-on classes, because there's going to be a lot more options. And I'm not saying we're going to 32 credits. I'm just saying we'll probably go somewhere toward that direction, and we'll have more opportunities for our kids to do some of those more hands-on things and hopefully close some of that, gender gap.
This is a great discussion. Thanks, Ms. Phillips, for those comments. I just want to point at I don't know which district it was that recommended the dropping the list and stuff. I'm absolutely against that completely. I think what we've done is, my understanding is that there's a list provided that's optional. And there's a couple reasons I'm really not in favor of this, that just let the district and the taxpayers fund everything, and let's just not ask anyone to do anything as a parent or a student. I'm very much against that mindset, and this is why. Number one, that says to our community, the taxpayers are just going to fund our entire school system, even if you don't have kids in school. So what that says to an elderly couple or someone on a fixed income is, we're going to use all the money that we get in taxes from the taxpayers and just use that to buy everyone's school supplies, when that's an opportunity where families could actually, and families want to. If they can't, there's no punishment. This is not no one has been kept out of school because they didn't want to bring something. This is an opportunity for all these families that want to contribute to do so. And so I'm totally against removing that as a completely. And even the pain, I know a lot of us disagree on this, but I'm even against having field trips where the kids can contribute something. I really think we've lowered our expectations so much in fear of offending someone, or in fear of that someone may not be able to pay the $5, that we've essentially removed dozens of learning opportunities and opportunities for growth in our students and families. A perfect example is if you look at numbers today, teenagers actually work significantly less summer jobs, less employment than they did when we were in school. And so that's disappointing to me. So we've lowered the expectations, saying that we don't want people to pay for things, but what percentage of high school students do you think have a cell phone? Maybe our students can help on this. So let's see, Ms. Craig, Ms. Quiros, what percentage of the students at your schools have a cell phone? I'm just curious. Give a guess.
I couldn't give you an exact number.
We'll take an educated
but
guess.
From everything from a smartphone to I've seen some kids with flip phones, just any sort of device. I've even seen kids use like tablets and download the Text Me app or something. So everybody with a device that they can contact with, probably around 89%.
That was exactly. I'm going to quote you on that. 89%. Ms. Quiros, what do you think?
In all my classes, or based off this, I don't think there's a kid that doesn't have a cell phone.
Okay.
So
That's fair.
I'm gonna say it's probably a good 95.
Okay. But we have people that say we shouldn't say that students should pay $5 to go on a field. See, that bothers me, and I think that we have our priorities mixed up, that we don't want anyone to make a sacrifice because we're worried of offending someone that says, I can't afford that. Well, so few of our students actually work in the summer compared to 20 years ago. We need to start changing that culture and mindset a little bit back to and certainly there are people that do, but if you look overall, it's significantly less than 20 years ago. So I'm, again, in favor, sorry for the little rant, but I am not in favor of anything like that, because I think we're really selling ourselves short and setting our expectations so low of students and families and not allowing them to contribute in a way that many of them want to, that I'm not in favor of those types of policies.
So we do this campaign at our school that's actually launched right now, is where we do like winter wishes. So just based off what I know from winter wishes, we have students who notice their friends or something are in poverty. We write little notes and put it in boxes, and then we get donations from the community for things like groceries. I don't know if you've heard of it. You get like groceries or like a laptop or like new pairs of shoes, and just based off like the donations that people are receiving, I know that at my school, I mean, we're a smaller school, we only have 400 students, but I know at my school we do have significant poverty. I know based off of our campaign and like learning about it, there are homeless students that go to our school. So I just know, like, as laptops wise, I mean, phones are easy, but laptops and just like other technology like that, I know there's some people who are kind of can't get those things, but I think donations by people who can are still really good. So
Yeah, no,
not to like totally disagree with you, just
No,
like,
I think it proves my point, actually, and I love that point, and I appreciate you bringing that up, because that's the type of thing that's amazing and that connects you to each other by doing things like that for each other, right? If we just rely and say, well, let's just let the school district just give us everything, like let's just give every teacher $20 and just have them buy all the supplies and everything they need, you don't get stuff like that to happen. If we just say we're going to provide everyone a laptop, we're going to provide everyone all their materials, everyone just shows up and expects everything to be handed to them. And you don't get cool things like that, like these drives and these things where like, hey, let's work together and help the kids in need, or let's help. We're doing that at my work too. We're doing, a little Christmas tree thing for family in need. And that's awesome. And it doesn't happen as much if we turn into a system where everything is just handed to us and we just have to show up.
And speaking out to the lowering the standard that you mentioned, I'm not quite sure, because thinking about it, I'm not quite sure where you draw the line at lowering it or raising it, because I don't know. As a teenager, I've always been told, act like an adult but stay in a child's place. So that's always kind of been like my excuse when things come to, oh, I can't do that because I'm a kid, you know. But then when, oh, Mom, I want to go out tonight because, you know, you say act like an adult.
Actually.
But that comes in play when, like, where's enough where you say you are an adult, you're not no longer a child. You might be a child according to the law, but I'm 17. There's certain stuff that you know what's right is right and what's wrong is wrong. I see kids every day at my school not do their homework, not come to events, and most of the time it's because, well, I don't have to. I'm 16, 15, 14. I'm a kid. I don't have to do these things. And it's kind of like, where did we learn this from? Like, where is this coming from? Because I know my mom, she's always like, oh, yeah, when I was 13, I started working for my own car. So I was like, not me. But it's hard to know where to draw the line between that is. And if we could find that, that would be good.
Yeah, no, that's exactly. I mean, we can go too far either way, right? But you're exactly right. I mean, I started doing paper routes when I was 8, and I had my own money, and that was awesome. But kids can't do that anymore. Now no one can do a paper route because it's dangerous, right? So I mean, it's really a different world. But we don't want to go so far to where the expectations are so low that no one learns those skills that we learned as kids. So we're doing a disservice to the kids if we do that. The last thing I'll say is the ASB cards. That's another good example. We have, I think, the lowest rate in the state. If I want to, or is that right? $20, whatever it is. I think that's a travesty. I mean, every student in high school is capable of mowing a lawn or babysitting or doing something to earn $30 or $40 to pay for their ASB card, I feel. And since, like you pointed out, that doesn't happen these days, I think we've gone too far away from that.
And on the ASB card thing, I know that last year at our school, Chihuahua, it's $20, and they wanted to raise it to $25, just $5 more, but it was denied. And our entire ASB, our executives, our advisor, we were kind of all baffled by it because it was just $5 more. But then we thought about, well, 73% or 73 and higher of our school is on, assistance. And it's kind of like you don't want to be selfish and think all this $5 from 1,500 kids that do buy the ASB can go into winter wishes or can go into making a better assembly. And then you're like, well, can they afford the $5? And it's kind of that line again, are we lowering it or is this where it needs to be? So.
And I think it's kind of different than, I feel like economy-wise it's changed and how easy it is to get a job when you're a teenager, because I know I tried to get a job and it took me quite a while to actually land one down, even though I feel like I'm a hard worker, and I was gonna say something else, so I forgot.
No, I think you're right. It is harder. My 11 and 12-year-old just taught us a plan to go shovel once they get snow. They're going to sow and ask money to shovel sidewalks. I'm like, some of the people's driveways. I'm like, that's brilliant. Okay, and we were trying to talk about what should the cost be, and so kids want to work hard, and I applaud you for trying, but it is hard in some ways. But there's definitely opportunities.
And so I have friends, and I know when you're a teenager and you do get a job, a lot of the time, even when you get money, it's not always yours. Your parents take it and they use it for their own. Well, I have a friend who helps his parents pay for their bills and stuff, just because, especially in impoverished areas, like my friend has a job and he's helping his sister pay for her college. So it's not always yours.
Yeah, no,
anyway.
I totally agree, and that's why I think the balance that we are talking about is that it's not a requirement. Anyone that's truly cannot is welcome to not, and we'll support that. But to just establish that as a standard because we're afraid of someone being offended that they can't, I think that's gone too far. So the balance to me is it's not a requirement, but allow everyone that can to contribute.
What's interesting is I don't think we had school supply lists when I went to school. I think it's kind of a relatively new thing that You know, sometimes my teacher would say, hey, you need a peachy. Can you come to school with a peachy? Anybody, they call them peachies anymore? Remember those gold things? Anyway, but, you know, they had the paste glue and the big, huge crayons when we were in the first grade that the teacher provided. That's part of it, too. You know, you'll have a lower poverty area. The kids bring less. We need to make sure that there's enough. We do field trips for our store out in Othello, and a lot of times a teacher will come in with a check out of her own account paying for all of the kids that didn't bring the money for the field trips. And there are a lot of teachers that don't come because there's a single mom supporting a family and they can't pay for those, you know, 5 kids. It's difficult. So they just choose not to do field trips. So it's a balance, and I think that's what equity is about. I do believe that we need to take responsibility for our education. Kids need to know that, and they need to own it. At the same time, we're all paying taxes. We're doing this. Equity is about making sure we give every child what they need, and it doesn't matter where they're at in life. And so I think whatever we decide to do, we need to make sure our kids have what they need to reach their own potential.
I know at my school, and I couldn't exactly tell you the name of it, but I know there's certain programs that when you couldn't afford to pay for your soccer uniform or your ASB fee or the requirements you have to meet, the $10 fees for clubs and such on, there's certain programs that will pay for that for you. You have to fill out a form, go in and talk to the person. And it's all about stepping out of your comfort zone, because nobody likes to ask for help, especially in the situation where it seems like I'm just so poor that I have to come ask for help from this person. But the idea of just taking away the family's responsibility of buying school supplies is, I don't want to say it's bad, but I don't think it's a necessarily good thing either, because if you can't afford it to that point where you can't buy anything at all, or 4/5 of the stuff that's on the list you can't buy, then there are programs. It's all about asking for help, though. You have to step out of that comfort zone, you know?
So one of the ones I attended, Ms. Thornton attended this also. It was leading systems change for equity and student discipline. And one of the questions they asked is, do you have random acts of interventions in your schools? And I'm not saying we do. I know we're making great strides in that area. Sometimes we get emails as staff or as board members from parents who feel that there's many random acts of intervention and my students aren't being treated consistently and or fairly. And so I don't know how prevalent it is, but I think Ms. Thornton probably got some information there. It was a little bit dry, but I think it's an important thing to do. Again, leading system change for equity and student discipline. And they talked about PBIS, which we've integrated. They talked about OSPI has tools, Washington Integrated Student Supports Protocol. So it sounded like there's some tools out there to support our district in coming up with what they call the multi-tiered student support umbrella. So many different programs like our PBS and like other programs that I'm sure we're doing, but figuring out how to integrate them so that there's more of a seamless implementation of them instead of random acts of interventions. They said, I think that Central Valley does it really well, integrates their programs, and I'm not sure if we've talked to them or if there's anything to glean from them or that we already have gleaned, but that was their example of a school district that they thought was doing it well by looking at the multi-tiered system for student support.
I think one challenge of like these buzzwords like equity is this big thing is people may view it incorrectly, and so if we want to look at it as meaning equal at our schools, I think we may miss the boat a little bit. Like, for example, New Horizons has a daycare, they have a food pantry, they have other things there. Does that mean we need a daycare at all of our schools? Probably not, you know, and maybe, I don't know. But I think it's too easy to just kind of look at it like, well, everything needs to be the same and provided. But I like how Ms. Curdo said, Every student has different needs, and we need to address those needs. Absolutely. And that's going to look different, actually, more different than the same to meet different needs. And so that doesn't mean that it's the same program, the same structure, the same buildings. It means that we're adaptable, that we adapt and are flexible with our curriculum and instruction and maybe placement and providing what those students need. Like one example would be, we have 2 comprehensive high schools that have together 5,000 students. They're both over 2,000, roughly 5,000 students. And we have Delta that has 400 students, around 130 from Pasco, and we have New Horizons with 350. So the vast majority are at our comprehensive high schools. Well, I think that's not right, those numbers. We have more students that would benefit from a STEM high school, from an alternative high school, from an alternative learning model that we're not serving. And so more of the same isn't necessarily what they need. We actually could benefit from another STEM school or a different school altogether that's an alternative learning experience to reach more of those kids what they need. And that doesn't necessarily look equal, which is what a lot of these presentations that I've seen talk about.
So I think that's part of our, as board members, education, and Ms. Whitney can help us with this, but also educating staff and the community. What you're talking about is equality. And most of the presentations I've seen have made it a point to differentiate between equality and equity. Equality is giving every single school the same thing. Equity is, like you mentioned, giving schools different things. They may need different things to succeed. And we've seen this graphic over and over again, and many people probably have, where you have different sized children with either a ladder or a block or a brick to stand on, and we say, in order for this kid to succeed, they need to see over this 6-foot fence. Well, the kid that's 6'3" doesn't need a block or a brick, so we don't give them that. The kid that's 3 feet tall needs a 3.5-foot block or brick. The kid that's 4 feet tall needs a different brick or block. And so I think that's part of, again, we had this discussion before, and I think some of the board said, oh, we shouldn't focus on equity because it just confuses the community and they get frustrated that everybody thinks they need to get the same thing. We need to educate people that equality and equity are different. And I think we need to focus on equity as a board and a district. That's my opinion anyway.
And I'd rather make that fence a child's potential. So I don't love that we're trying to make every child the same height so they can see over that fence.
It's an example.
Because some children they all have different talents, and it's really important that they reach their full potential. And I think that that's what, when you can barely make it and things are rough, that child, I look at me as a mom, and there are kids that take vast amounts more of my time than other children in my personal care. And that is still equity. I can still get them to where they need to be and how they need to be that. And it's going to take longer with this child than this child, and they're going to all land at different places. And I believe that that's how it is. But I also believe that we do have to do more. It's to that extent of how much more do we have to do. We might need to pay teachers in a high poverty class, give them an allowance for school supplies, and maybe not much in another one. That's equity because parents are providing it. That's critical. I also think there needs to be equality at some level. It's going to be really hard to run a district if we have 27 different curriculums. Some things need to be the same. So I think it is important to decide between those two, but I also think it's important to understand that sometimes things do need to be the same.
Yeah, I think for the equity point, I think at a high school level, to me, that's going to look like something that we don't have currently, which would be, say, like a 600 student high school that's like a Tri-Tech Skills Center or our own STEM high school. At an elementary school level, I think one of the ways that we can address this is, what is the level of principal control over the building, and what is the level of sameness or equality of experiences? You guys brought up the number of field trips. Okay, so How do we have a standard across the district? Is that something that each building decides that's equal between the grades? And those are the type of tough decisions, I think. How much flexibility do we want to allow each building to have, and what should be a standard, kind of like we've talked about with technology? Is there a standard that every teacher and every student should have across our district? And if we want to apply that to these areas, in terms of field trips or other opportunities, what should be a standard district-wide type policy, and what should be allowed flexibility from building to building?
And oftentimes I think the equity discussions are hard because you're talking about what certain students get versus others, and some people say, why isn't my kid getting this? So it's a tough conversation. And you look at like the seamless intervention that we talk about with birth to 9 or early learning. We're not saying that every kid can get Head Start. Well, we don't get to choose that. We're not saying that every kid must do Ready for Kindergarten. We're not saying that every kid must do any of these programs. We know that different kids need different things, and so part of that whole seamless intervention thing is equity. And to put a plug in, we as a board won at WASDE in the whole state and all the schools that applied school boards. We won the Excellence in Equity Award awarded by the Washington School Board's Education Foundation. One, we wrote up about the seamless interventions, or the birth to 9 early learning type stuff, and that we're not just offering 1 or 2 options, we're offering a gamut of programs and options for our students. We have outrageous outcomes that directed the superintendent in how to interact with our stakeholders. We had those didn't. The operational expectations did. We had I'm butchering this. We had the outrageous outcomes, also the 5 high-level educational goals that we were looking for all students to achieve. And Miss Whitney and her team have put together benchmarks in there to help all students achieve. So in all 3 of these areas that we won this award, as a district and as a board, we're not just looking that one size fits all in any of these programs. And I applaud the district and the staff for looking at that and implementing equity into these programs. Even though we don't always talk about it and say, here's why we're doing this for equity, we could probably talk about it a little bit more. They implement equity into their daily work, and so I appreciate that.
Another example I thought of, as I've been visiting elementary schools the last couple months, and multiple elementary schools that we have actually provide an afternoon snack, a healthy snack, to all of their students at the school. And it's part of a program. I don't know if it's a grant or something that those schools have. And the thought occurred to me, this is brilliant, and we should probably do this at all of our schools. So my kids' school finishes at 3:40, and they come home famished. And the thought occurs to me, gosh, how much better learning would occur like in the last hour or 2 of the day if they actually were able to have a snack around 2. The day I think there was oranges at some schools, visit carrots another day, and it just occurred to me, this is something that should happen at all schools, but it may look different. Maybe it's something that is paid for in part by parents. I mean, I don't know. That's where I think we get into the difference, but that's an idea or something that probably all of our elementary schools need, especially if they're getting done at 3:40 and they have lunch at 11. That would be awesome for the kids. It teaches them to eat healthy. It provides this opportunity. It'll help their learning, but maybe how it's paid for is going to look different at different schools because they don't qualify for the grant.
So then with that award, we got $1,000, which isn't a lot of money for a district our size, but as a board, we have that money. So
all of our schools.
I think we'll have a small conversation in the future on how to spend that money for students and doing something nice for students. Something like the program that Ms. Stoll talked about, or something else that benefits equity for kids.
So just to kind of highlight, our Vanessa and Job and Morgan really focus their time in sessions on things around equity. So their board report to you is actually going to have a request or a recommendation in terms of a program. So that's something for you to consider for the $1,000 potentially. But we also are going to integrate this topic of equity, which all 3 kids were really inspired by, into our next Student Advisory Council, and use it as an opportunity to do some focus groups with our students around the concept of equity. because what I learned in going to the equity sessions is what we believe is the reality for our students might not be the reality for our students. And the student voices in the classrooms are what we need to hear in terms of how to make their experience feel equitable, right? So we can talk about supply lists or ASBs or whatever. The answer to the question about how does this educational experience feel equitable to you is in the classrooms in our schools. So we're gonna use our Student Advisory Council as kind of a test group for these focus group questions to see how that goes. We met with Ben Abali, who's a trainer for WEA, who came and did a whole school-wide training for us at the beginning of the year and said those districts where they start with harvesting the student voice hit it out of the park in terms of the concept of equity. Those that don't have a more difficult time meeting the needs of the students because they didn't ask the students. So we're going to give it a try at Student Advisory Council, and I'm excited to try it, and WA is excited to partner with us about it.
And will your presentation include, we have on here Unity Works and Compassionate Communities. Does anybody want to talk about those briefly in the next 5 minutes, or should we save that for your presentation? Vanessa?
Their presentation is about Unity Works.
Okay.
I went to Compassionate Communities.
Did you want to say anything about that?
So yes, I guess I will. So Compassionate Communities is an initiative that I actually started to get some interest in about 1.5 years ago. And it's not a program, it's more of a philosophy where as an organization it aligns really perfectly with the requests made about that partnership with the City Council. And you guys have interest in meeting, there is change there, so there's an opportunity for some conversation, not that there wasn't before, but this is prime for that. And you would come up with a common kind of philosophy about what it means to do our work in a way that's compassionate to our community. So it could look like a compassion pledge. There could be, and that we would all, like the City Council, the Chamber, the district, school district, et cetera, they would commit to this pledge that we, compassion in this community looks this way, and we're going to do business in a way that's compassionate. Or one of the Lacey School District, these little compassion coins, and that was awards that were given out to community members or organizational members that acted in a compassionate way. So it doesn't have to look a certain way. It's more of a philosophy of how do you unite your core organizational kind of representatives in a district or in a entire community around the idea that we're going to work together, we're going to have some common expectations for the way we treat each other and do business. So it aligns with some of the things that you've said, and we can look forward, or we can look at how we might integrate that.
One other thing that they spoke to when they spoke of equity was a activities bus. And I know we have some of those activities buses throughout the district, but we don't have them throughout the whole district. But I thought it was a really good idea because I know for a fact that there are kids that don't try out for sports or do some of these after school. And Vanessa, you're nodding. Do you know that too, that there's kids that don't because of transportation?
Yes.
Yeah. What about you, Kristana? Have you seen that too?
I have. They used to do a 5:30 bus, and I know a lot of kids this year, they actually took primary courses, like core courses, off our 0-hour schedule because not as many kids as last year decided to take 0 hour, because last year there was like speculation that there would be a bus, so kids signed up. But now there's no speculation. Everybody knows you're on your own. So I think 50 kids, where last year we had closer to like maybe 120.
So that's another thing, that it would be a big expense for the school district, but I think it might help with that equitability, especially considering one of our 5 outrageous outcomes is that all kids will be involved in an extracurricular activity. I'm not sure we would have to go both mornings and afternoons, but I think that would be something to help with things being equitable.
I think a way to maybe offset some of that would be to make, and there's been talk, I'm not sure in our district, but I've read in other areas of making, just in general, the school buses not picking up kids that are within a certain, it's become very generous, let's just put it that way, that kids that could be walking to school probably are actually picked up, and so that if we kind of spread that out a little bit more, if you live within a mile or whatever, that I don't know what the standard is currently, that could maybe make up for the difference. I wanted to know Were there other, I think with the student voice, I mean, we're just knocking it out of the park with the student council. I mean, were there other districts that had similar, and if there were, like how many? I mean, out of the 295, I would be surprised if there are many with as much opportunities for the students that we're providing, you know, and I think that are invaluable, really. Do you?
I thought our students were the best there.
Okay, so we had the best, for sure.
Did you hear of any other student council or in your conversations with other students?
One of the girls actually asked about the student council because they don't have, other than her being the student rep for her district and like her ASV, they don't really have another group of students. So they wanted to implement the student council at their school.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean,
It felt to me like there, and you guys can speak up, it felt to me like there's actually less student involvement, and each year it seems like it's been becoming less. Like 3-4 years ago, there would be quite a few student reps, and they had planned activities where they would get together and all the schools would go to a dinner, and that wasn't there this year, so it's been kind of, seems like it's been declining, at least at the WASDE participation level. I don't know about if there's actually student board reps at other schools that just aren't coming, but at WASDE there was less, I thought.
I was in several of those sessions with our students, and I was surprised how many times the instructor would ask you questions. That happened quite a bit, didn't it? How do you feel about this? What do you see happening? And so our students were useful for a student voice in all of these classes that we went to. I would say more of the classes than not asked for your opinion. Would you say that?
Yes.
Okay.
yeah, I mean, and it makes sense, right? You're the most important stakeholder here. I mean, this is your future. I mean, this is, you know, I have 4 children in our school district right now, and I mean, this is about them, right? I mean, I don't need anything from the school district for myself. I mean, this is not, I don't get paid to do this. This is for the children. You know, this is your future. And so why shouldn't you have the greatest voice? And so I'll just bring it up. We've talked about this in the past, but so right now we have a representative from all 3 of our high schools except for New Horizons. We did have a New Horizons, but not a Delta. So in my mind, that's not equitable or equal, whatever you want to call it. It's not that we should have one from every high school, I feel. And so I don't know when that'll come up again, but I'll say the same thing then, is that to me, they're not being represented. They're represented. They're on the advisory council, I understand, but in the future, I think that we should have a voice from every high school on the board.
All right, anybody want to say anything else about equity before we take a brief, about 5-minute break and the board can grab some dinner? All right, after we grab some dinner, 5-10 minutes, we'll come back, and our next topics are boardsmanship, supporting the whole child, the board annual work plan calendar, impacts of McCleary and House Bill 2242, and bargaining. We'll start with our next topic is boardsmanship. So the table's open for anyone who has anything they learned from WASDE or anything else they want to talk about how our board's operating, boardsmanship.
Well, I guess we were board of the year last year, right? So we're pretty awesome.
Ms. Phillips alluded to it earlier that she went to a presentation, and I was in there with her, where some people from academia, a professor and a community college teacher, I believe, had been looking at highly effective boards and how boards interact with their community. And an interesting diagram that I saw was they had community engagement, or they had the community, and then they had the board, and they showed them as boxes, and they said you have effective boards and not effective boards. But one of the things they looked at was the community and the board not overlapped like this, and they said that's a disconnected board with the community, and that's not good. Then they showed what they called the elite board, or where the board knows best, and whether by perception or that's how the board actually operates. the board was overlapping and dominating the community and not listening at all. And so you could be over here, and when the pendulum swings, you could have the board that's dominated by the community, where the community is telling the board what to do. And then you have the effective board-community relationship, where there's the perfect balance of overlap right there. So just for people to keep in mind that there's two different things, where the board can be dominated by the community can be dominated by the board, and if you get to either sides of those pendulums, you want to try and bring it back to the middle. So that's what I took from that presentation.
I took a lot from this. This is something that I've looked into a lot and was interested. A lot of the places a lot of the things that we go to are school districts with direct hands-on work in their own district, and they can tell you how successful they've been. These two men who presented were professors at universities. They had never run a school district in their life. So what they basically went in and did was they evaluated different districts from board meetings to see how effective boards correlated with student achievement. And there's been several studies done on this, and most of them have seen a direct correlation to some degree between effective boards and student achievement. So it's something that I feel is really important to us, and I also like the way they presented that. I also like that they said, the board's perspective should look up and out, and a superintendent's perspective should look down and in, and it's a balance that you have to be really careful of, because often boards get down to the grass roots, and they're too deep into it, and that's not their responsibility. So I thought that was really good. Successful boards stay within the realm of their responsibility. They don't micromanage. They have a healthy relationship with the community and a healthy relationship with the superintendent. They're careful not to steal power from the superintendent. And the same goes with the relationship with the superintendent. They are careful not to steal power from the board. There needs to be that balance there. And I thought that was really good. Low achieving boards, this is just from what they look. They're less orderly. There's less time spent on student achievement. They don't listen respectfully to each other. They advance their own personal agendas. They don't have good relationships. Fewer members. I don't know what that one is. The members don't rely on the superintendent's opinion of things. I thought that was interesting. Members of the board talk excessively, and there's less focus on policy. So those were direct things that they found with student achievement lowered at that time. One thing that I felt like was a really good idea is the idea of saying the best boards had something that helped them. They would make a board, there would be a board protocol for, and we have one of these. We have a policy of the protocol for the board, but I don't remember what was on there and what wasn't. But they suggested that, everyone sometimes crosses a line that we probably shouldn't. We are people in a political world that you have to be a little bit careful on. And it said that they would have a member or two members that were in charge of making sure that what the board developed together, they committed to, and if they were in violation of one of their standards that they developed together, then they'd be talked to by the committee. And I personally thought that was a great idea. I know I have said some things that I didn't realize were offensive, and so sometimes it's nice, you know, we're not used to being in the public eye all of the time, and sometimes we say things and we don't even know that they are, that we violated one of our own standards. So I think this would be a really good idea because boardmanship is critical. And they also talked about effective boards being boards that are willing to voice opinions, listen is critical, and not always agree, but when they do come to a decision, then they support it with everybody. So when that has come to a decision, there's not a lot of, you know, sometimes we're like, oh yeah, they're just a yes, they're just an automatic yes. Well, an automatic yes, even though we might support something and have yeses most of the time, that doesn't mean that our discussions are 100%. We have these discussions, we listen to each other, we can change opinions in those discussions, and that's the time when we have dissent. But when we come together as a board, it's really important that we support the decision that was made by the whole. And I really liked that. I mean, that's something that I think we need to be aware of. Obviously not something we're going to put on there that everyone has to vote yes. That's kind of stupid. So anyway, but I do think it's important that we are very careful about a dissenting vote. And I think it's really important that we don't always agree, and I think we can do both. I also liked what they said that the board's responsibility was that when we reflect on how to involve the community, you need all four of these things: inform, consult, involve, and collaborate. And I think that's critical. Trying to think if I'm in the right place for this, because there are times when we make decisions and we inform the community. There are times we consult the community, like through a survey. And I think it's critical too. Another thing about surveys is that we also survey the kids. I think student surveys should also become the norm. And one of the things that I heard about surveys is you don't ever use those in evaluations ever, so that people feel free to say whatever they want, say what they feel, and it's not going to affect a teacher's, evaluation. It's not going to affect the district. It's just an opportunity to find needs and change, and I love that. But anyway, inform, consult, involve, where you involve with part of a decision, and then somewhere it's very collaborative, that you make decisions in a group. And it's really important to differentiate when the appropriate times for each of those forms of public communications. So I really liked that about that. So I really hope that we can act on this one. I really think it would be really good to have a protocol for, this is what standard that we as a board are going to hold ourselves to. And then make sure we try to work within those standards, and then realize that we're all going to fall out of those standards at times, and it's important that we realize that so we can make those corrections. And so I really like that. I really like that part of it, so I'm hoping that we can implement it. I think that goes with our governance too. I think there were policies on boardsmanship, and I would really like to see those back up, because we didn't finish all of the policies in that good governance book, and a lot of the ones that are left are on boardsmanship. So I would really like to go back to that.
I would agree. In addition to the presentation we were just talking about, I attended number 602, the Developing School Board Superintendent Operating Principles. And this was given by Freeman, the school district up to our north, where they had a great community challenge with shooter situations, And what it said was, learn about the importance of school board superintendent operating principles and how to implement them to create a stronger team in your district. Operating principles define the beliefs, values, and methods of working together, and they cost nothing. So we've created operational expectations for the superintendent, and I was hoping to go and maybe get some additional information to bring back and help improve ours, but I believe that ours are probably much further along and more developed than where they're at. So their conversation was more about our operating principles are that, once a decision's made, everybody on the board might not agree with the decision, but moves forward in a positive manner, supporting the board's decision and supporting that decision, to the public and to their friends. We've talked about that one before. It's part of good boardsmanship on almost every board education thing that we go to. Sometimes we might stray away from it a little bit as a board. They also said they'd never seen their superintendent was talking, and he said, well, I've never seen a decision that wasn't 5-0, 5-0, 5-0. And I was going, well, we have these, like we talk about this pendulum, you can always be 5-0, or you can have board members have the right to dissent. But again, once you have that dissent, move forward in a positive manner. And we as a board have talked about that. We've written down a lot of stuff, but maybe we, like Ms. Phillips says, need to revisit that, and maybe Ms. Whitney can help us figure out a constructive way to take all the work we've done in the past, now that we have a board here that is most likely going to be together for 2 years. We have another 2-year period here, and improve on the work we've done in the past and figure out how, as a board, we can all agree and get pulling in the same direction so that we're not pulling in different directions, and figure out how we document this and follow what we're writing down. And I don't know if we put it into some kind of, we have operational expectations for Ms. Whitney, into operational expectations between the board or some other format. But if you can help us figure out how to organize the work we've done in the past to make it easier for us to all follow, if we so agree, that would be helpful.
Sure. So all of your past foundational documents are organized and synthesized into one document under the operational expectations. So it's really about, I'll work with board officers about how you'd like me to bring that back, and how we want that process facilitated. If it's a process that internally you want to facilitate, if we want to bring someone in from WASDE, et cetera, so I can talk with officers, but there is a document for me to move forward.
One of the things that they suggested was moving all public comment to the end of the board meeting rather than the beginning. And I thought that was interesting too. They said at sometimes the beginning, if you have them at the public comment at the beginning, it starts the meeting with negativity. And they said boards that focus on positivity are much more successful. And they said oftentimes the questions will be answered in the course of the board meeting. And then the comment often goes toward, oh, can we make sure we do this? And can we make sure it's done this way, rather than you're not doing this and you're not doing this? And so I thought that was something interesting we could look at, and even in saving time of, okay, we're gonna have public comment here, and then after this, and then after this, and then after this. There might be times when we have to make a decision, we wanna know the public's comment. I think it's important that we take that time to do that before we make a decision. But I think but for the most part, we don't have a great cross-section of the community at a board meeting. So it's not the best, anyway, so sometimes we have that, but having it at the very end would allow them to talk on anything that had happened. Especially because a lot of things that we do, you have to have a first, and then the second is when you vote on it, so you get that information anyway. But the other way they said to focus on positivity was setting that example and encouraging schools to do that. And they said, they said schools that use things like marquees to say, instead of saying have a good year or have a good day, they say things like how many meals per year you have served, how many miles have been driven per year, how many square feet are cleaned per day or per year. They said those kinds of things really help the classified staff feel very valued, and it's interesting to the public, and they see these really positive, look at all of the things, look at the positive things that are happening. So they said by shifting from a negative point of view to a positive point of view in the district, the student achievement rises. Really interesting that there's a correlation there, so.
Like this discussion, I really like what you mentioned about the student surveys. I think that's a great thing that we should do, and I think it should be super simple. And this is what I typically ask principals and teachers: what do you love about your school? What do you think could be improved at your school? You ask that of your students and see what they say. using numbers to rate things. To me, that's not helpful. I mean, it's like, okay, well, we could do it again in a year, but it's going to be a different group of students. I mean, just ask people those two questions and keep doing the things you're doing well and work on the things that 100 people mention. Some practical ways we could do that soon would be in the naming of schools. I think the students should name the schools personally. You're going to be the 500 kids that go to this school. I think you should have a major role in naming the school. Another way would be, I know upcoming we're going to reevaluate kind of our STEM initiatives. I think that should have heavy student parent input along with the teachers and principals at those schools. As far as the public comment, I think we're nailing that. I would actually love to add another time at the end to provide feedback in addition to that beginning after every report and at the end, because we know that frequently there's not any comment, but also at the beginning, just as often, we have very positive comments that set off a great tone for the meeting where people are complimentary, they're bringing up an activity or announcing or sharing something or expressing gratitude, and those contribute a lot to the positivity of a meeting just as much, if not more so, than the negative comments that we've had in the past, which are less in my unscientific remembrance of the meeting. So I think if anything, I'd like to have more public comment, but I agree, I would love to have one at the end as well so that people could come in late if they have to and still share something and have that opportunity. So it keeps the meeting very open to the community by providing multiple opportunities for people that could just come at the beginning or just come at the end, and the people that are there the whole meeting that may have a question answer that don't need to stand up, and then they decide they don't need to by the end. So
Yeah, it is critical in times of in the environment that we've been in, this community outreach has had to be much greater, and we had to have a lot more there. I don't even know of a board that takes in as much community input at a board meeting as ours. I would like to see it changed. It is really extended meetings, and I still think that people will, if we put it at the end of the meeting, people will still be able to comment on everything that happened, and still be able to get their point across. The thing about a board meeting is it is a meeting for the board to do business, and when we want community input and we need it, we go and we make sure we have a cross section. We make sure there's plenty of people. We make sure that we have the people there, that can make those kind of decisions. So I don't know. I feel like we overkill it on our board meetings, and I think it's time to draw back a bit with it. And I think that it was also very interesting that these two had studied good boards, and this is what successful boards did, and where they affected. And so there's got to be something to the fact that sometimes less is more.
while we're on the topic of board meetings, where are we at with like the live streaming of our meetings? I know we've talked about that for a long time, and I know we're getting close, but I was just curious if we had an update or timeline for that.
How come you feel so strongly about live meetings? I mean, I would love to get them up a little bit sooner, but why do you think that's so critical?
Because I think we have a lot of we have as has been pointed out, a really young community, families with a lot of children that just cannot make a meeting, but that are interested. A perfect example is we just had our 6th child, so it is, my wife never comes to meetings because if I'm at the meeting, then she can't be. But for the city council, when they had a debate that was live streamed, we watched that together in our bedroom while we had the baby, working with the baby. And there are a lot of people in our community that would like to do that, but they don't have the opportunity. And then a lot of them do look online a couple days later to try to rewatch it, but there are many people that at that point it's just kind of old news, or they just don't find the time. But at the moment, like we just did a couple weeks ago with the city council, I can't remember, was it League of Women Voters? I can't remember who. There was some sort of thing that was live streamed that we watched together. Was it or a panel? Yeah, I can't remember. But anyway, so I think there's a lot of people that would like that.
Well, I think that's something we need to ask on a survey then, to see how big the need is. And I think we need to weigh that with the cost and with the trouble that it causes the district. I don't know how hard it is or how easy it is, but quite frankly, as a parent, watching something live stream is so difficult for me to do. I'd 10 times rather have it later, because at 6 o'clock at night, I'm feeding my family, getting homework done, getting ready for bed. I need it later. So you know, what I would almost like, I don't know how much trouble it is. I think it's something we need to find out.
It's not, we already know, it's almost, we're
So-
really close. And if you look at other districts and city council that do it, it's super easy because the equipment we already have, and it's really not a cost increase. And this kind of goes back to the equity that we talked about and providing what each person needs, because we're not all in the same situation. So this provides us an opportunity to provide what people need and want in a different way, just kind of like our early learning opportunities. We have 4 or 5 different programs, and people can access them in different ways, and this provides that avenue for people that would like to watch it live and be up to date, but that are not able to physically be at the meeting.
I know, and what I feel like would be really good is to have them, I know I've had people call and say, hey, how did this work out? And what did you guys decide on this? Because sometimes it's a couple of days or more before the recording got, at least that's what they said. I've never looked it up, so I don't know that. But, so I don't know. I mean, is that a big expense, or is it really easy to do? Mrs. Whitney, or?
We've been researching and exploring it. Yes, Shane, why don't come out from behind the camera and address the question.
Hold on, let me zoom out. So yes, it is doable. There would be some capital costs involved. We would need to do it well, we would need to get a new computer to be able to run the stream from in here in the building. To do it really well, we would need to buy a new set of cameras to outfit this room with cameras, and then have a control board, if you will, where we would be able to punch from one camera to the other, and then be able to send that live stream out over the internet. But it's a one-time cost. Once we have that equipment purchased, the actual operation of a live stream for each board meeting there wouldn't be a lot of additional costs involved outside of manpower.
Does a live stream record?
Yes.
Would you have to have 2 people manning cameras, or?
No,
Okay.
we could. We've done the research on that, and we would be able to live stream and have it recorded at the same time and I believe we would be able to post it on our YouTube page. It would post to our YouTube page immediately after it was done live streaming.
Yeah, that's cool. If I remember last year's WASDE conference, the main speaker was Jeff. I can't remember his last name, but he talked about this in one of the presentations. Yes, that was Jeff Utek, yep. And so this is the future, I mean, and they started doing that, and they had just hundreds of people watching this, and in an era where we are lacking in political involvement throughout the community, this is a way that we could really grab more people's interest, I think, and it would far outweigh any cost by having more people involved. That's more people that can be involved when there's bonds and levies and things like that.
So is it, I don't live stream, I'm sorry for my ignorance. Is it for Facebook, or what, only Facebook, or is it for other things too?
It's that same idea, right? But that's the big thing now. People love to do that, but Mr. Ettinger probably knows better.
Where do you live stream it?
And for this particular one, we would live stream through YouTube, because YouTube offers the opportunity to archive it, to have the meeting recorded and then immediately posted onto their YouTube page. With Facebook, it will keep the recording, but it'll keep it. The archiving of that video is a little bit more complicated. It's certainly much easier to do it through YouTube, and I can't remember what the other part of the question was.
So would we also then still be able to work with the public cable channel?
Yes, because right now how the Pasco PSC TV, what they do is they download the video from our YouTube page,
Oh, they
and
do.
once it's on our YouTube page, then they
Nice.
air it
Okay.
on their channel 191.
Okay. So would those cameras be beneficial even to the recordings now? Because right now, a lot of times you're getting the backs of people's heads.
The cameras would be beneficial because what we could do is we could buy two. They would essentially be kind of like security cameras. They would be mounted up in the ceiling, or they would come down from the ceiling, and we would likely what we would do is we would mount one behind you or behind the desk so that it would point back out towards the desk here and towards the crowd. And then we would have another one pointed towards the board desk. And that way it could, and we could have, the cameras now have the technology where we could set, the camera can pick up each shot and we could frame, each one of you as you, so that it would take a single shot of each of you as you were speaking.
Somebody just has to push. the
Exactly.
button
Somebody has to be
control.
paying attention to who's talking and then pushes the button for Steve or pushes the button for Scott as it goes.
Which we already have a cameraman, so wouldn't that man or
Right,
woman
exactly.
be in charge
That
of?
that person would be in charge of it,
See,
yes.
you can talk to me afterward about my political correctness, so.
Camera person, is that
Yeah,
like
camera
the-
person,
I don't know.
anyway. Would we, I know that we're really careful about budget and looking through the lens of how this would help student achievement. Would this fit, how much are we talking about? And would this expense be, could we, would it be, I think, I don't know, we need to go toward technology. And so if the expense is something that we already need anyway, and live streaming is going to be easy, then heck, let's do it. But if it's a huge expense that's not going to be that beneficial, then I'd rather not.
Can we ask you guys to put together a cost estimate, put it in a Friday update, and then maybe your take as a district, pros and cons of live streaming, just in a Friday update, and then we as board members can look at it on our own and we'll decide if we want to get it on the agenda? Is that fair?
Perfect.
Okay.
I think one last comment, I think, is I like how you tied it to student achievement, and this is how I look at it. The bond proposal we just ran passed by 7 votes, and that was even with false claims in the voter's guide and the opposition statement. If through live streaming we just involved 10 more families, 10 people that were not previously involved, that became involved in their child's, just became more involved in the school district, that could have made a huge difference just in this bond. It could have been worth, I don't know how many votes, if they're involved and engaged and they can all talk to their 500 Facebook friends, like, to me that and then that affects student achievement. So it's kind of a roundabout way, but from a big picture view, that's huge to have more involvement and people invested in and with knowledgeable of like the information that we want them to have. To me, that's invaluable.
Then if we're talking about equity and we're talking about the importance of involving more people and the amount of people in our district that speak Spanish is at least as big as the amount that speak English, do we need to start having these translated?
Did you want an answer to that, or?
No, I don't
Okay.
know. I mean, I think it's
So-
something we all should think about,
Hypothetical.
especially if we're talking about equity.
Well, I know that we translate graduation or we translate assemblies. Why is that any different than translating board meetings? If we already translate things everywhere else, we have the people wear headphones where they get it translated, and if we already are translating, why
Is
not
there-
extend it to everything?
Is there a way to take the audio that is translated back there
Oh, you
and
do?
I don't know if you can link it up with the video or not, but we already translate it, but it's just audio, not onto the video. I don't know if there's a way to link it up.
Here, we provide translation services. What they're talking about is translating the video.
Yeah.
Boy, could we
Same
marry
thing.
those two things together? Whoever translates, it's a.
Yeah, maybe we can look into that, how to tie the audio translation into the video.
It would have to be 2 separate live streams because you couldn't send the same, there's no SAP button on your on your video or on your computer. So you would either send it out in English or you would send it out in Spanish. And I have not looked into what it would take to send out 2 live
I
streams.
guess what I'm saying, when he translates, is it recorded and put onto, like, can you put it on a link next to, do we put it on the district site for one? Or can you put it next to it in YouTube or something where someone can push on it and hear what he's saying back there? That
So we can explore. I think
Yeah,
you're going to
I'm
hear us
just
say
saying
we don't
explore
know.
that. Yeah.
So we'll explore it.
And if at a minimum, we can maybe post his recording
Right.
onto the district site as part of equity, if we're not already doing it. I haven't seen it, but
At this point, I don't believe his translations are being recorded.
then we'd at least have an audio in Spanish.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, I think that could be a a happy balance, right? This is a difficult question. I mean, I speak Spanish. I have hundreds of friends and families that I work with, but this gets down to difficult questions, right? And we have hundreds of families that speak Russian. I mean, so do we have to see, it just gets really, we have a lot of families that use American Sign Language. Do we need to have a person at every meeting doing sign language? I mean, it gets really tough, and I think we find a balance. One thing we've done is expanded like the English language classes so that we've eliminated the waiting list. So anyone that wants to learn English can. And I just was having this discussion at work with someone where the mom, the Hispanic family, the mom actually speaks English fairly well. She worked hard, and the dad was there and doesn't speak English at all. And so we were speaking in Spanish for dad's benefit, and then mom would speak a little bit in English, we'd speak a little in English, child would speak. So it is an interesting dynamic, and I'm not saying I'm in favor or not in favor either way. I'm just saying that I think we can find a balance, and I think the wrong answer is that we just don't do it because we're afraid that that's going to be an issue, right? So I think too often we shy away from something, again, because we're afraid someone's going to be offended, or we can't provide the perfect scenario for everyone, that we just do nothing, and that is not the right answer in my mind.
Okay.
So
Good.
before we move off,
Yep, go ahead.
So on the live stream, I mean, certainly people can go back and watch it now. Are these posted or uploaded pretty quickly?
We
And
try
I
to
don't mean
get
to
them.
put you on the spot, but I'm just curious.
We try to get them up within a week
Okay,
at the
so
latest.
It could take a week.
It
That's
does,
kinda like
with
watching
the way
the-
our system is set up now, it does take us to get both meetings up usually takes at least 3 or 4 days.
So what's nice is the live stream would immediately post.
Right, the live stream would make our job, that part of it, much easier, because it would automatically post to the YouTube page.
And you watch it live, so if you have a spouse that's here and you're home with the kids, you could literally text them, can you go up at the public comment at the end and ask this? You know, that's something like that. I mean, you just can't beat the
I guarantee my spouse won't be watching it live.
Oh.
I'm taking care of all the
That's
kids
fine,
while
and that's
I'm-
fine, but we have 17,000 students,
right.
and there are hundreds of people that would.
I'm not sure our board meetings compare to football, but watching football.
There's no football Tuesday nights.
Even watching it.
I will tell you, my husband did watch the graduation. And then when I got home, he's like, "Why were all those kids hugging you?" I was like, "Well, anyway, it was cute." He sat and watched the whole graduation. It was nice.
Yeah, DVR and football just isn't the same. And I'm not sure. Again, I don't know. I'm not sure how many people would we get tuning into a live stream. I mean, if we do this for 5 people, I guess that's 5 potential voters, but I can see value in this for other things as well, not just this. We talk about our community builders. I'm sure there are a lot of people that would have an interest in that wouldn't be able to attend that, and it would be great to be able to watch those meetings and other meetings potentially. I think the other thing that would be helpful on this is some kind of feedback mechanism where people can give feedback I mean, the challenge with feedback is you can get some that can be a little snarky, and you can get some that are very constructive. So we've got to be careful. I think, though, people who make the effort to come and attend the meeting, those are the ones that we should give priority to feedback. I don't think we would take a session at the end of the meeting and start reading comments, but I do think feedback would be good for those who want to watch it live. I'm going to change gears here, get off the streaming. Has anybody else got any more comments on that? So we are, as far as boardmanship goes, thank you, Shane. You can back and man your camera. So we're at the beginning of our 2-year period again here, and I think it would be good for us to have a session. Not that I'm in favor of more sessions, but to set some board goals and to just go over boardmanship and talk about some of those things that we want to accomplish and achieve, maybe improve over the next 2-year period. So.
Could we finish off the rest of those policies in one, or would it take several?
It's a dense document. I mean, you had probably 8 to 10 foundational documents I tried to distill down into one. It's a lot. I wouldn't recommend trying to slog through it in one sitting. I think you probably need to dig into it and kind of get your head around it, and then go away and think about it and come back. I mean, it's a lot.
Yeah, and it would be nice to know what pages and stuff so we can get that It's nice when we can read it in that book before we get here. Because we were going off the board governance, weren't we, to come up with some of the board policies, that good board governance book. Was that with you, Aaron, when you first got on the board, when we did that?
I think you started it before. but
Okay.
I kinda jumped in.
We need to
Some of the
finish.
stuff you're talking about is from years before, though, also.
Yeah.
Some of the stuff she's talking about slogging through would be from before probably any of us were on the board. Maybe Sherry was, but there's probably stuff from before you were even on the board in there, I'd imagine.
Oh, my goodness. So
It's a
we're
compilation of many years of.
So we have a mountain of work, and we have a bunch of working people trying to accomplish
Well,
that.
so yes, but the caveat is this. I took the 8 to 10 dense documents and tried I identified like all the overlaps and the overlaps in themes and collapsed it down to what is fairly manageable, I think. But I also didn't want to change the work of prior boards. So I didn't eliminate anything, I just collapsed it. It's dense, and if you want it to be a real process where it's gonna drive behavior of people of a group, I think you want to give it the time that it needs.
Well, at the
Can
same
you-
time, you already did a lot of the work just by collapsing those documents for us. Yeah.
Can you send that to each of us, either through the Friday update or through email, with the caveat that no one's going to read this and give Ms. Whitney direction on doing anything with it? It's just a kind of a first read for us. Is that fair?
Yeah.
So can't we take this like curriculum? We're not going to try and do curriculum all in 1 year again, or 2 years, hopefully.
You're right.
We've got this.
Never again.
Do you know what?
We take a little bit every year, and we may not be on the board when they get to the subjects that we really care about or are passionate on, but let's just take a little bit at a time, and over the next 5 years, 10 years, whatever period, we can slog through, or somebody can slog through all of it.
And that board document, that one that you collapsed, I personally would rather see it when we are going to go over it. So if we put that on the agenda, that's when I'd like to see it, not this week, because.
Okay.
I'll
So
have
you
to-
can send it out, and those who choose to take a first read at it can choose to do that. Anyone else on boardsmanship? Okay, we'll move on to supporting the whole child. And I do want to say one thing, sorry, 1 minute. On facilities planning, we're talking about getting the community involved. And this is from a WASDE session I went to 2 or 4 years ago in Bellevue. But I remember they talked, and it has to do with facilities planning and voting, and it's also a civics lesson for kids. Ms. Thornton may have been there with me. When they were talking about educating your community on what you need, it's just like these surveys. You can't do it right before the bond, right before the levy, and go do that. But what some districts have done in the district that presented was they actually went out and they made it a civics lesson. I think every 2 years in their general election, they had all of their students vote, not just on bonds, not just on levies, but it could be on presidents, school board members, other things. And you make it into a short civics lesson. And what they said that does is you're not going to get survey numbers to know if your bond's going to pass or fail. But what you're doing, if you do this ahead of time, is you're getting the kids, the elementary school kids, to talk about elections, to tell their parents about elections that are happening, to tell their parents that there's a bond or a levy on the ballot. And you're also not focusing just on school stuff. It's a civics lesson, but those kids go home and talk to their parents and say, hey, there's 7 city council members up for election this time. There's 3 school board seats. There's a bond. And when those kids go and talk to their parents, it's community involvement in that way. And not that you're necessarily going to get yes votes, but you might get more votes in this day and age when it seems like voter apathy and whatever else, if you go look at general elections over the past 10 years, have reduced every year. And that's a way that our community and our school district can help in combating some of that voter apathy. So just an idea. It's not direction from the board, but if we got our whole school district doing that, we get more community involvement.
My son's class did that, and he came home and he loved it. They got to vote for everything that was on the current ballot, and yeah, he did. He came home and told me about it. In fact, he even said, "Mom, I just want you to know that I did vote for you, even though you will have to be gone, every Tuesday." So I thought that was pretty nice that my youngest decided to vote for me.
So
Even though it's less time.
I'd like to see us implement that across the district, but again, just personal request. Okay, next, moving on to supporting the whole child. We have counselors, nurses, behavioral specialists, PLCs, and a principal PLC as the topics.
I guess this is probably mine. This is one that I went to, I hate where this is, I don't know why. Where I went to, a lot of my focus is always on student achievement. What can we do to get our students achieving better and doing better? And one of the things that I found in 2 of the main school districts that really went into this was that they really use counselors and nurses and behavioral specialists, social workers, as a lot. They used them a lot more. They had things like, for behavior intervention, they had things like yoga and meditation. And instead of, in-school suspensions went way down, out-of-school suspensions went way down just by helping these kids have some cool down time. And then with the ACEs that we're doing, they would have parents and kids do these ACEs, and they would word it in such a way that parents could be honest without us having to file a mandatory CPS claim. So, because sometimes what's happening there, but a parent won't admit to that if they think they're going to get their kids taken away, but it can help them. It can help the school know where the kids are at and where they're coming from and what extra intervention is needed. With the opioid epidemic right now, and with this huge growth in social media that tends to have a negative impact on our emotional and psychological well-being, counselors, nurses, all of these things are even more important. So I just feel like there's lots of things that we can improve upon, and I think we've talked about this a lot. So, I feel like most of what we learned at this wasn't like, we need to implement this new whatever. I liked what one of the districts said is, you don't want your principals and your school teachers and your superintendent think that they're pancaking things. We're adding one more thing to the pile. I think that's something we need to get away from in our school district. We need to quit adding one more thing to the pile. But what we can do is we can enrich and grow the things that, sometimes it's necessary to add one more thing to the pile, but enrich and grow those things. We already have counselors, we have behavioral nurses, we have or behavioral specialists, and we have some, social workers and things. But having them, do some of these things and I think we're doing that with the PBIS, and then we have, I was talking to Superintendent Whately earlier, and she talked about the behavioral specialists we actually have in school now. So all of those things are helpful. One thing that was also said that they said really helped was they had across the district mental health PLCs. And the nurses, mental and physical health, PLCs. And the nurses and all of the other people came together, and they said it was incredibly valuable as different schools got together and said, this is working for us, this isn't. How do we solve this? And so I think that's great. They also, in talking about this, talked about the importance of principal PLCs, which I learned we have. I didn't realize we have principal PLCs, but as principals talk together, they can help the whole child as well better as they learn from their people in the same situation as they are. So that's basically what I learned. In supporting the whole child, mental health is coming to a crisis, and we don't even know all of the reasons why, but we do know our kids are coming to school with more needs because of a lot of things, and so it's something I think that's really critical.
I would have to agree, and I think mental health has been rising and is really important to address to students, specifically how to deal with stress and how coping mechanisms, how some ways to wind down. I know we had one day last year where we it was health day and we did yoga and stuff, but we also like had a time where we were just thinking and giving strategies on how to de-stress and giving strategies how to let go of some things and just kind of balance everything that's going on in our lives. And I think it's equally as important as being physically healthy is mentally healthy as well. So I think that's really cool.
I just, while we're on this topic, actually want to acknowledge Sally Wright, who's in the audience, who brought to us, in collaboration with some of our school counselors and teachers, the concept of mindfulness. And we actually have a consultant either in the district or coming to the district, I believe in December. Thursday. That's starting with training our counselors around the concept of mindfulness. And this was really a grassroots collaborative effort between Sally and some teachers who actually just happened to find each other at the training. They didn't each know they were all going to be there. So there was teachers, counselors, etc. brought the idea back, and we're providing training to our starting with the counselors on Thursday. And the idea is that we'll train our counselors in it and then support whoever else wants to be brought on board. So I just wanted to acknowledge Sally and her leadership along with some of our counselors, in particular the counselor at Maya Angelou, but the counselors as a whole are really excited about the work. So we'll be excited to kind of give you some updates on how that unfolds moving forward.
Yeah, mindfulness was one of the strategies that was talked about across the board in all of the different sessions that I went to that supports the whole child. So that's critical. It also goes right along with kids doing yoga for exercise. It's mainly learning de-stress tactics, doing some of those things that help their minds to relax and to be able to engage and to work again. And breathing techniques, are another thing that can really help de-stress. And that's what mindfulness is all about. So I'm glad we're doing this but I think the thing that it would be even more valuable with is the teachers, because you have a class that's getting agitated, and hopefully we'll start with that and then give the education to the teachers that are interested in that mindfulness to help calm their students.
Well, and the idea is for us to create a train the trainers model. So you would identify a core group of people that are really interested, train them so that they can train our teachers. So you're building capacity within the organization to sustain the training over time. So we're really excited about it.
Great. Oh, that sounds really good.
So this sounds like a challenge to me. Like, Ms. Phillips was talking about, we're just adding one more thing to these teachers, and I just wonder, is this just one more thing that now you've got to watch out for mindfulness or whatever the word is and whatever that represents?
Do you want me to address that?
I would love to hear it. I'm not sure this is the place, but I think this is, we're losing teachers for whatever reason. There just seems to be where there's not enough teachers, certificated teachers, that are doing this. And if this is, I don't know how we address that. If we can get counselors and nurses to address these things so that teachers can teach and not have to worry about other issues, then I think this is definitely something that we need to look at as far as adding more counselors, adding nurses, whatever we need to do so that we can get teachers in the classroom focusing on educating students, not on whether they're homeless or whether they need food or things like that. Now, I don't know how we address that. I just think that this is something that needs to be addressed outside of a teacher's responsibility. They can notify, but not have to worry about it.
Can you give us a 1 or 2 minute blurb on it, on what you're doing?
I certainly can, and I'm
Okay.
glad to do that. So we know when students come into the classroom and they have so much trauma that they are not intentful on using my teacher voice.
You can pull that up and stand up if
But
you
you're
want.
being recorded,
We'll see if
so
we
you
can
have
do
to have
this.
it.
So when the students come into the classroom, and their lives are already out of whack. And as a teacher, what I want to be able to do is set the intent for the day. And that's part of mindfulness, is to set the intent for the learning. But in the meantime, you may need to take a minute or two to do some deep breathing exercises. What we're finding is kids are self-regulating using their cell phones at the high school level. And that's their way of de-stressing, coping, debriefing, right? It is. You're connected in. So what we want to do is give them a real strategy. Deep breathing
And the science behind that is, yes, you can do better cellular respiration, which means your brain works better, which means you may be more focused on learning. So the whole premise behind mindfulness is to get it in the hands of the teachers. The counselors are a step. The nurses are a step. But any teacher can do it in the classroom. And the trainer that's coming was a teacher in the classroom. It didn't work. So she became a counselor. And it didn't work. So she decided to grow her own company called Generation Wellness, which treats the whole child. She's presented to the Tumwater School District. She presented at the SHAPE conference. She works with the University of Kentucky, Central Washington University. We may even become a pilot program with Central Washington University. So Lindsay Morris is the trainer that's coming, and she's bringing her colleague from the University of Kentucky. She's also going to give us visual support. She can give us the curriculum if we need it. But what we want to do is grow the counselors first. And then let's get it in the hands of teachers who can use it. And it takes a couple of minutes. I mean, if you can help a child self-regulate so that they know what their breathing is, so that they know what their intent for the day is, give them a yoga activity, they're in charge. And that's the whole point, is to put them in charge. And if you want to look at the Anchorage School District, they've been working on mindfulness for the last, I'm going to say, about 10 years. And they have a 4-quadrant social emotional learning, students I can, and it's all laid out. So if you want to do a little extra work on that, just how it fits into a school system. But our trainer coming is a teacher. And I'm a teacher, and I've done these strategies, and it works. It really works. And even our AP students need the same strategies. So it's not just for trauma,
Yes.
lower socioeconomic children. It's for even our AP students.
It's for everybody.
So it is for
Well,
everybody.
and that came out in the student advisory council meeting, the last one. They wanted to be taught stress management strategies. And so they're breathing exercise. These are not like curriculum units of
No.
instruction. They're really quick things that you teach the kids to do. And so, I mean, they're just tools for the teacher's toolbox. And teachers become skillful with which tools to pull out when they need them.
And
And
they're
that's-
very easy to do. They're very
When I go to
engaging.
Sally's office, there's a breathing ball, and she taught me how I breathe in and breathe out. And sometimes I do it like this.
So when I was in elementary school, I had an ex-military guy that was our 5th grade teacher. And it was rare to have males teaching, but he was my first one. And he used to just say, he'd send us on fitness breaks every hour or two and have us run half a mile out to the fence and half a mile back. And then that must have been a similar tactic, but that was his tactic back in the day. Fitness break.
And
Everybody run
students
for
can
the
just
door.
step out into the hall, and they can do a couple of things if they really need it. But they know. We just have to help them recognize when they need a skill to cope, and then let's just give them a strategy and make it so everybody does it. It's no big deal.
And this is definitely a tool thing. Is that I had the exact same terminology when Steve said this seems like it's pancaking. When you have a child that's disruptive in a class, they are the bane of your existence for the whole day that you're there. It's just hard. But if you can pull that child in and help calm them, you'll have a lot of times you'll have a couple hours with them, and then you have to do it again. But I just started substitute teaching again in March, and it's been several years since I've done it. Well, it doesn't take me long to figure out what's on the computers, and there's a mindfulness app. And so there's times when I'll just put that in, and the whole class spends 5 minutes doing this. It's usually 1 or 2 minutes doing this mindfulness app. And it just helps bring the kids back together. So it really isn't a pancake. It really is an enrich and empower it's a tool to help teach better. And it's great. Our kids need these kind of self-regulation skills. I need those kinds of self-regulation skills. Yeah, let's breathe.
This is a great discussion, and I like it
Thank you,
addresses
Sally.
a lot of things that we've kind of talked about. So when you brought up kind of the counselor, the intervention, I think some things we're doing are already addressing this. A lot of our schools have added a behavior specialist. I remember soon after I was elected, I was on the board. The first schools I visited, one of our amazing counselors gave me a document and said, this is my job description. This is what I should be doing. And I don't get to any of this because I'm putting out fires all day. And that's no one's fault. It's just that her school had 800 kids and she was the only counselor. So all these things that she could be doing, that she's skillful at, that she knows how to do, that she could be helping all the kids gain those skills, she couldn't do and felt horrible every day because she was putting out fires. I mean, that was just the reality. So I think we're addressing that in a great way. And that, to prove your point, that's not something that just like our, what do we call them, poverty schools, priority, is that what they're called? Priority school? I mean, every school needs that. All of our schools need that. Every child needs those skills, whether you're at a priority school or a non-priority school or whatever they're called. I don't like that terminology. Another thing that we're doing that's been helpful in that regard, kind of addressing the whole student, is like the family connection meeting. So they added that in SPED. We do it in kindergarten. I don't know why we don't do that in every grade. So this year I went to some of my older grades teachers at the beginning of the year and just said, I just want to meet for 15 minutes, just want to tell you about my child, meet you, kind of make that connection so that you have that understanding. And so how do we not do that for every student? It's the same idea with like with an IEP, and I know you're familiar with that. So an individualized education plan for special needs student. How do we not have something like that for every student? If we're really about equity and meeting the needs of the student, whether or not they qualify in that type of, one of the definitions of someone that would meet the criteria for an IEP, why doesn't every student have kind of this individualized education plan so that we've identified their needs, their strengths, right? I mean, these aren't new programs. These are like, this is just providing a well-rounded education that is equitable and flexible for the needs of that child. So those are the types of things that I think we should address. And I love the ideas that you mentioned, kind of the PLC that addresses all those issues. That made me think of the IEP meeting where you have multiple people kind of giving their input and you come up with like, okay, how are we going to help this child succeed? The programs that we have at some schools like AVID that teaches study skills, and even some of our elementary schools now, I didn't realize that could also be an elementary school program, but some of our schools are incorporating some of that to teach their students more of these study skills and organization, and those are the types of things that if it's beneficial for most of our students, for one school, and it's a evidence-based practice, why don't we do that with all of our schools if it's something that pretty much every young child needs? So I think we're on the right track.
I don't do IEPs for every child.
Oh yeah, I use that, but if people have been to IEPs, and I have for when I was actually in school, we had to go to one, and they're not perfect.
They're hugely labor intensive, hugely
I think
labor
I'm more in
intensive.
favor of a practical 10 or 15 minutes, just where you even just meet and just talk, but I agree, the IEPs are crazy and a lot of it's required by law, but just a more practical connection is what I think is more reasonable on a wide scale basis.
You know what? I just wonder if something like that couldn't be addressed with a survey at the beginning of the year. If we make surveys a practice, it could be a real tool in communicating with our parents.
Yeah, I agree. I think that could be something that maybe people are nervous to talk about. Maybe that in conjunction with, I think we're getting away from face-to-face meetings too much. I just had a parent yesterday tell me that for their conference, it was a telephone conference. And I said, oh, that's weird that they do that at your school. And she said, well, yeah, they said, I mean, if you really feel they need to come in, you can come in, but otherwise we'll just call you and just talk briefly on the phone. I was just flabbergasted, like, wait, that's where we've come to? Like, as soon as it's just going to be a Facebook message that says, like, your child's doing fine. I mean, we're really missing the boat if that's what is the standard. To me, sitting down, and that's how you make a connection with someone that's meaningful, that's going to affect your child's education.
And using the phone conferences might be great for those parents that can't make it.
Sure, yeah, that could be an option, but this parent was like kind of encouraged, like, well, if you want to come, and so it's all how we word things and stuff, but to establish that as the new standard is we're really missing the boat if that's something that's widespread. And I don't know how widespread it is.
Briefly, I'm seeing the same thing at my kid's school. I don't know that means it's.
It was a parent at your school that told me.
They said, what I've heard is you can come in if you want. If you do come in, it's going to be a student-led conference, which we've done those before, and you talk to your own student. And so I think some parents might take that after they do it once as I can do this at home. I can talk to my student at home, and so I don't know how widespread it is, but.
Yeah, no, I agree. The student-led, I know there's probably people on both sides of the fence now, but I agree if that's just what you do every day, right? I mean, the whole idea is to be able to talk to your teacher about the student, and I can see some value in having them show you, but that can be a separate or additional thing, but you miss kind of the opportunity to really make a connection with the teacher about your student.
Yeah. Mine's tomorrow.
I know, mine's tomorrow too. We'll talk about it.
Okay. And at ours, they can do either one, the student or not. And I told my son I didn't want him there because sometimes I can have a more valuable, more valuable talk without the child there, and I can talk more candidly about the child if that's necessary. I did love it at the middle school level though, because those student-led conferences help those students to take responsibility for their own learning, their own education. And so, anyway,
Was the teacher involved as well?
and the teachers were involved. I mean, I went to all the teachers as well. So, to me, it worked really well. I was still able to voice concerns and things, but at that point, it was great to hear my child take, this is what I'm doing, this is where I do this is how I do this. And then if I had questions, I could ask the teacher, which I did. So it worked great.
Yeah, we had a middle schooler too, as well as recent conferences, and from the other parents I've talked to through work, I mean, sometimes they were able to talk to you, sometimes they wanted to but couldn't. I mean, there's just it's a whole mixed bag, and so I think, again, it's a challenge we face, partly with overcrowding. These are the types of things that don't come up on a chart, right, that has number of students. These are the types of experiences that affect our children's education, but that are not easily conveyed in a chart with 100 numbers on it. So this is the type of information that people need to understand that makes having overcrowded schools very challenging.
And nice to, if we have regular surveys, how did you like the way your kids' student conferences went? I think that's critical, and a quick way to make sure we're serving the needs of the parents.
Love it.
Okay. If on our agenda we have 3 more topics left. This is all very valuable conversation. Thanks for everyone sticking in here with us. We have 15 minutes for board annual work plan calendar, 30 minutes for impacts of McLaren House Bill 2242, and 15 minutes scheduled for bargaining. If we use less time, we'll get out earlier. If not, again, very valuable discussion that we're having here. So board annual work plan calendar.
Yeah, this one, I wish we could have got that paper. I went to the same one did you go to that one last year, Scott, that looks like a periodical table? I went, and there were, I think, 5 or 6 schools that had implemented Bellevue's periodical chart for their board calendar. I loved it. I thought it was a great idea. They all put their own flair onto it, but I know we said we didn't want it to look like the periodical chart, but I haven't seen anything that compares to that, and so I would really like to go and make it look like that, because I want something in front of me that's, okay, we're talking about this, instead of trying to find it and see how, Anyway, I just think that having that visual representation would be a really good idea. And I loved some of the advice they gave, like to top load at the beginning of the year, put a lot more, what do you call them? Times when you more things on the agenda, less things on the agenda at the end, because oftentimes things get pushed back. You don't have to be married to the system, and you can push back things. And so even though we have something that outlines the year, it can still be pushed back, but to top load it, because often it does, and then we'll have, and then we can do that later. So I think that's critical. I love what we've done, because they're the ones that helped us with, visiting a school every, making sure we're getting to every single school. And then having schools give reports. But what Everett School District did was, I think, even better, and I think anyway, and we could put this with it or different, but they had, instead of trying to have everyone go to every single school every year, they actually split the schools up between all of the board members. And you could still visit all of the schools if you want to, but you were the representative, or I don't like that term, and I don't think they use that term, but there were, anyway, and in theirs there was 26 schools, so each board had 5 schools. We could do that and split ours up, and we'd each have 4 schools. And then they had this really cool thing where they had a state of the school review, and they went over 5 different things with every single school, every principal. And I think this will really help tie goals together and tie the outrageous outcomes, and make sure that the district goals align with the principal goals, and that we're all working to move together forward, together. Anyway, they had tons of growth with this. By implementing this system, their kids' scores just skyrocketed, which I would love to see. But they had the schools present a comprehensive data analysis with data points that were the same across the board. So all of the schools presented the same thing. And then it talks about PSAT, SAT data for high schools. The high schools will look different than junior highs, obviously. School improvement action items and key performance indicators, they did that. They even have times. We used 20 minutes here, 30 minutes here. They tried to get it all done within an hour. Developing high performance teams was 10 minutes. And then I loved at the end that they had support needed. They give the principals the chance to say, this is the support, and they always have to start with, that was one thing, with grateful. So when they get to the support needed, that the principals are responsible for saying, we are grateful that you provided this and this and this. This really helped us in these ways. And the support we would like is this and this and this. And they said they took boards of what they needed, the support that was received that they got, and then the support that was needed, and they put it around their boardroom. And they had these things, and they would check off the lists as these things were accomplished. And they had those posters that helped remind them. They wanted 2 board members at every one of those meetings, and then all of the staff, all of the school staff would come to that. Not teachers, but the vice principals, the principals. Anyway, I think were most of the people that were there. And they said at first it was like scary for all the schools. They were like, wait a minute, we're going to get dissected. And it got to the point where they loved it. It was their way of showing their progress, what they were doing. They said it's not a time to beat the schools up. You have to be really careful about that. It's a time for the schools to show their progress, what they're doing, and what changes they're making, and how they are reaching these various goals. I think it would be a fantastic idea. I think it would go perfectly with our outrageous outcomes, and I think it would provide unity in our school districts as we are more connected, or feel more connected, even though we're not, as a board member being there, we wouldn't be giving advice, we wouldn't be telling them what to do, we wouldn't be doing anything. We're there to listen, we're there to hear, and this is a report and they do it every year, and they have them all scheduled out a whole year in advance. And they have makeup time. So if there's a snow day or whatever, there's like 3 or 4 makeup slots for the whole entire school. So I just love that. They said one of the things that schools get really ticked at is if a board member doesn't show up, if one of the board members can't come for some reason. They said they really appreciate that they feel supported by their board when they show up to these meetings. And so I think it's something that if each of us was required to we would have to go to 8 every year if there was the person who was over that school and one other person, or somebody who has more time maybe could take more and others less. But I think it's something that would really help our schools. I think it would help our student achievement go up, and I think it would help them feel more connected. I just think it's a win-win all the way around.
Anyone else on board annual work plan calendar? Okay. Next we have 30 minutes scheduled for impacts of McCleary and House Bill 2242. I had put this one on the agenda. Look for some notes here that I took. There's just in-depth discussion about the impacts of funding and what it'll mean to different communities. There were several things I'd heard that I was telling several people about that I don't know that we talked about as a district, and maybe the district can research it, but one of the things they said was that we talk about the, is it a 85 or 90 cent raise on property tax, that 90 cents I think, that will go to the state. And they said, well, we've been looking at that, and it's probably may well be, 20 cents, 25 cents more per district than the 90 cents stated, because it's not a straight 90 cents. They said that there's a Department of Revenue ratio. I don't know if you guys had a chance to look that up yet. There's something called a Department of Revenue ratio that will also be used that looks at your community's assessed value versus the actual market value. So they go and look at sales and take the percentage that your assessed value is under sales, and they call it the Department of Revenue ratio, and they'll increase that value. So they're saying that it was going to be 270 is the number we've been talking with the 90 cent raise. It could be 285 or 295-ish, depending on how far under your community is for assessed value. And I think we're pretty far under, at least looking at most people's assessed values now versus what the recent sales prices have been. So when we talk pennies per thousand or cents per thousand, that number might be a little bit higher than what we've been talking about as the overall impact to the community. Oh, yay.
I think we need to be careful there too, because this isn't just Pasco. This is, and I don't think Pasco's the only one that.
Right, it's the state.
Assessed
Almost
value
everyone's under assessed, they're saying.
Right. So it's going to be, but it'll be across the board. I mean, they're not going to raise everybody's 20 cents over. The average is 90 cents. Some are going to go up, some are going to go down. So I wouldn't expect that. I mean, our assessed values have gone up pretty good in the past couple of years. So I
Right.
would expect, I know home prices have too, but I don't think they're going to look to gouge anybody. They just, this isn't new. They've done this with the state assessment for forever. Is if your community assessed value is inordinately out of line with the home prices, then they will adjust it, because they don't want communities under valuing their homes just so they pay lower taxes. So
Right.
On average, it's going to be around 90 cents. If we're a little under, if our assessed values are a little low, then it could go up a little bit, but I wouldn't expect it to be too much beyond 90.
Theirs was on average, it's going to be 20 cents higher than 90, so it'll be $1.10 on average across the state.
So if somebody's is 20 cents over, somebody's is 20 cents under, or there's a lot of other communities that are a few cents under, but on average, it's going to be 90 cents. It's
No,
not.
that's not what they said in this, but it's something for us to look
So
into.
I'll have Howard look in and find the specifics for Pasco so that we're not confusing people with something that might not apply to us. And I think that's really important given
Right.
the levy coming forward.
Right.
So
The way they explained it, somebody asked this question, was we say it's 90 cents, assuming that everybody in the state has their assessed value on par with market value. Our market assessment shows that on average, the state of Washington's assessed values are X percent under the market value. So on average, everyone's going to pay 20 cents more in order to raise the revenue that we're talking about when we looked at an assessed value of this. So they're saying the average is going to be $1.10 instead of 90 for this year with the assessments that they're looking at. Which surprised me, and maybe Howard can give us a report after he looks that up. Yeah, just discussions on what we've already discussed as a board and as a district, that there's a difference between the state tax money, that's a set value at 90 plus whatever this correction is, versus our local levy that we set for a certain dollar amount, or our local bond that we set for a certain dollar amount. Stuff that we've already discussed as a board. But yeah, that Department of Revenue ratio was one of the new topics that I was surprised by.
My assessed value went up, so most everybody I know.
Oh, mine has gone up so
But, and that's the thing about the state dollar amount doesn't adjust with more dollar value. It's fixed. So what is it now? Is it 270 now? I don't know what the state portion of our taxes are now.
They said it's 270 now, or after the 90-cent raise, it'll be 270, and that's where they were
Yeah,
saying it
so-
might be more like 290.
So if it's $1.80 now, and then your house goes up, if, for our local levy, your home goes up, your overall tax bill probably stays the same because everybody else's goes up as well. The state value doesn't. It goes up. Your value goes up, it goes up. So it's a little bit different.
I don't think it can be understated how, no matter what these little differences are, how good this is going to be for our community. Okay, because right now, as has been pointed out endlessly, our tax rate is very high, but this is equalizing to some degree. There'll be some variations, but in general, the levy is going to be more equivalent throughout the whole state. And then if you look at your bond payment, well, that's paying for your school. So obviously a community like ours, it's grown a ton and we're behind in buildings, we're going to have a higher bond payment, but because we need more schools, we're in a vibrant, growing community. So I think that this is going to be so great, and a point that needs to be driven home with the levy is that this is a great, great thing for Pasco. It's going to decrease our tax burden, but we're not going to lose money, and that's a huge message. I mean, if everyone understands that, I mean, this is a great, great thing for our community.
I 100% agree. Our challenge will just be in the next year-ish or two when people's taxes go up by 90 cents or $1.10 per thousand, whatever it is.
For 1 year.
Before it goes
Right,
down,
for 1
to
year.
let them know that doesn't mean, that you change how you're thinking and say, I'm not going to vote for school.
We just have to realize everything's always a year behind, essentially. You're voting on something, but it doesn't get implemented the next day. I mean, so I think that's something that people can grasp. What you're voting on today isn't going to be implemented tomorrow.
So it's great we're not trying to pass a bond next
Well,
year.
It's doable.
It's a
but-
good thing. It's a good thing this bond passed for this reason, because, we have some flexibility in how we sell these bonds and what our repayment is on these, so we can make that tax impact less by the way we adjust this bond. So it's a good thing we have that flexibility with this bond. So I don't know if there was anything else you wanted to say. I was going to just
No,
say
I'm
on the McCleary thing, one of the things that I heard was that I'm not sure we're going to get a lot of movement in legislation this year. I think the legislators feel like they've done what they need to do. There's still some concern with the pay, the regionalization, and so forth. I know there's some concerns with that and how that's all going to wash out in the end. But I think as far as any significant changes in legislation, that's not going to happen. I think they want to take a break and just see how things finally do settle out. So we've got what we've got, and I think we need to just be wise and conservative going forward, that we don't put ourselves in a position where if we get any major changes that it upsets us. So we just be cautious and conservative moving forward on our expenditures.
Any other comments on impacts of McCleary and House Bill 2242? All right, our last topic is bargaining. The two sub-bullets we have here are interest-based bargaining and open public bargaining. And other than that, anything else you learned at WASDE or would like to discuss as a board?
I will say I was a little bit surprised there wasn't more. I don't think I saw any presentations around bargaining. Did anybody see any
Yeah, there
on
was
the
an
list?
interest rate for bargaining.
Oh, okay. Did somebody go to that?
Yeah,
Because I
Scott
did
did.
not go to that.
I'll just say I wasn't there, but I'll just say from day one I've been in favor of open bargaining, and I still am.
I went to interest-based bargaining, and it was one of the first sessions, I think. See if I can find the number here. I'll find it and tell you what the number was. But what they said about bargaining and the group we had was, I better find it before I say it.
I can look if you want to talk.
It's okay.
'Cause wasn't it early
Yeah, if you
in
can
the
look, it was one of the
conference?
first couple sections, and I have it marked up in there. They talked about interest-based bargaining. They said that they got respected members on their team, which I think our team has been trying to do. They got the Uniserv rep and district consultants to really take a back seat so that it was, and this would be interest-based in agreements between.
Right here. Oh, you found it, all right.
It was number 104, if you want to look up the presentation done by the Snoqualmie Valley School District. And they said they had a really hard bargain, I think, in maybe 2013. And they came back and said, we'd never want to do that again. Both sides. So it had to be their union side and the district. And they decided to reinvent the district's bargaining model using interest-based bargaining. And what they say here is they discovered how a dynamic approach to bargaining was developed through collaborative work with the Teachers Association. The model yielded a much improved process and a timely settlement. It also set the stage for continued positive relations between the district and the association. A couple things I picked out of it was that, again, they got the Uniserv rep and the district consultants to take a back seat, and they all sat down. Once they come up with their interest-based objectives for each side, they sat down and they said there wasn't a lot of sidebars or anything like that. They were always at the table, constantly talking and working together, and maybe our districts had that kind of relationship at different points during the history of bargaining of the district. So it would have to take a collaborative, a wish and a want and a will for both sides to have interest-based bargaining. They also said that, I was surprised by this because we looked at this as a board and we're trying to find any boards that did this, but they actually thought that one of the most important things they did was they had their board members as observers, so that their board members, not necessarily going every day, but if and when there was, they said, back and forth, the board had a feel for what was actually going on at bargaining. If you have open bargaining, of course, then there's not as much of a need for that. But I'm not saying that it's the right thing to do or something that we should do, but this board thought it was vital in them understanding what was going on in bargaining and having a good relationship with the union. And it was just the first time I'd heard that, because I know we as a board, when we've had difficulties a couple years ago coming to a agreement with the union, looked into that, and we were told by almost everyone we talked to at WASDE and other council that wasn't the right thing to do when we looked outside of our district for council from other districts. So first district I heard that had actually done that, and they thought it was a positive thing that they did.
This is why I'm in favor of open bargaining. I'll compare it to this experience I had when I lived in Texas, and I wanted a Honda Accord, and there were all kinds of dealerships, and the one I went to was the largest seller in the entire region of Texas, and it was because they had one flat price. The price was listed, you went in, and that was the price you got. There was no debating or bargaining. And to me, that just seemed fair. Why should someone that's a salesman come in and get a car for $2,000 less than me? That maybe I'm not a good bargainer, right? I mean, I'm not a trained bargainer. And I feel the same way in this. All parties should be reasonable, right? I mean, I don't think anyone in any district should feel like a gotcha type thing, or that they won the bargain. I mean, why can't we just have something that's reasonable for everyone? This is a taxpayer-funded system, and there should never be a feeling of like I gotcha, or that there's misinformation. This is something that I think it would save us so much time, effort, money, headaches, however you want to look at it. That we just I don't favor anyone. I just think it should be a fair deal for all parties. I mean, is that like too simplistic and realistic that we would just expect that okay, well, what can we do for you? What can you do? What's a fair agreement? I just think that it's that simple. I think and all these games and having board members there, and that's just, we're adding to the game. And I think we're going to see more and more of this in our state and society go into this.
Another thing they said was, and maybe we do this, maybe we don't, they thought they sat in a horseshoe instead of us versus them, confrontational style. Maybe this is common, I don't know. Every other member-ish kind of being union member versus district staff in a collaborative method. They said that the union president and the assistant superintendent was the lead bargainer. Again, no heavy involvement from Uniserv or district outsiders, and they were co-facilitating the bargaining. And their example, in 2013 they had the hard bargain. In 2016, when they went to this interest-based, they said that in February to May they had 5 10-hour sessions of bargaining. So they started early throughout the spring, 5 10-hour sessions. Then they said in June 2016 they kind of hit it hard, and they did 32 hours over 3 days, so 10-hour sessions over 3 days in June of 2016. And on June 23rd, both sides got frustrated and they went back to positional bargaining for a day or so. And that's when the union president and the assistant superintendent got back, and they sat down and they spent hours discussing and discussing priorities again in the planning agenda, and then they went back and they had an agreement like June 24th. So it wasn't all sunshines and lollipops or anything like that. They tried to go back to positional bargaining, but at least the leaders in that school district, again, did I say Snohomish? At this time, Snoqualmie Valley, sorry. The leaders in their union and the leaders in their district agreed together that this interest-based bargaining was the way to go to do what's best for the interest of all their students.
I think this is a tough subject. I mean, it's easy to, well, I guess. We're on camera, so it's, I know, that's the, well, be honest. No, be careful. That's part of the reason we have closed bargaining, I believe. And I'm not opposed to closed bargaining, because you can, I mean, that camera right there is recording everything we say. And somebody can go back and watch it. So I'm not going to be open and honest with all of my feelings. I'm not going to be dishonest, but I'm not going to share everything I feel. And I think that's the value of having a bargaining session where you can say things without having somebody taking it out of context or making a crazy statement about it. However, that presupposes that everybody at that table comes there with good intent to truly bargain what's best for all the players in there. And I'm not sure that we've had that in the past. Now, I don't mean to disparage anybody, but that, in that kind of environment, if everybody's not bargaining from what's the word we use, in good faith, then we need to open it up, because there needs to be some outside observation on that. Now, I've never seen a bargain. I've never been a bargainer. I don't. I want to trust that our district and our union people are doing what's best. I don't want to get in the middle of that. I'm not an educator. I'm not a union person. I want to trust that they're doing what's best for us, and I don't want to get involved. And I would love to be able to have them bargain and say whatever things they need to say to each other to get to an agreement. But again, it requires both of them acting in good faith, and the reports coming out of it being universally agreed to. So that's kind of where I'm at on it. I don't know. I think I agree with Dr. Richardson that we're probably going to get to a place where that becomes more and more common. I mean, open public meetings is something that's come around in the past 30 years, 20 years, and it just gets more and more open, so we may eventually get there. But I don't know that that's the best bargain, and I'm not even sure that's the best board meetings, is when they're always open, because people are not going to be totally open with the way they feel. So anyway, I don't think anybody has the intent to be dishonest, but in our world where there's a camera and a microphone in everybody's pocket, it's and people wanting to sabotage other people. I think it's just tough, so.
There was also, we'll see if this comes out. There's also discussion with some people about Tequila had implemented open bargaining, and at least one board member, maybe more than one, thought that it was really beneficial, and that board member didn't seek re-election, and so she didn't seek. I mean, she's been on there a long time. She chose not to seek re-election, but with that no longer being on the board, she felt comfortable possibly writing up a paper on that. So it might be worth us just understanding from a board member's perspective what open bargaining looked like for them.
Yeah, it would be interesting.
And I think
to
that'll
read
come out
that
soon.
Paper for sure.
Yeah, it's interesting. There'll still be things, even in our meetings, open public meetings, that are protected, right? If we're discussing real estate, if we're discussing personnel or litigation, like there's
Or
still
bargaining.
Right? Yeah, right. Well, I know that's kind of a changing landscape, right? But I think to the point of like things being taken out of context, that's exactly what it protects you against, because if someone does take something out of context, you can just go right back and say, well, no, let's look at the whole picture. And that's something you can't do right now. And if we look back, I know I was the only one not on the board 2 years ago, but as a community member looking on, that was one of the biggest frustrations, that people were being dishonest, and no one knew who, because someone would say, well, we're showing up here, and they were not showing up, and you're late, and you're always late and not prepared. And as a community member taxpayer, you have no idea who to believe, right? So you're trying to decide what is going on. And so then everyone knows what happened, but that scenario wouldn't have happened that way. I'm not saying you could never have a strike, but if you had open bargaining, those questions would not be present ever, because it's like, well, no, here's the time, here's the camera, here's what they showed up. And with the car analogy, I went to one other dealership. I said, here's the price that they advertise. If you can beat that, I'll consider buying from you based on how I felt with them and if it was much better. And they went back to their person and they came back, well, we'll give you this. And it was like $2,000 higher. I walked out and went and bought it from the other one. I mean, I'm like, it's that simple. I mean, this is the advertised price. I'm not going to play games. I don't have time to play these games with you. Let's just be honest and have a good deal for everyone, that we can both feel satisfied, that we both win and got a good deal. I went to a second place. They were nowhere near and wanted to do this back and forth. And I said, forget that. I don't have time for this. Went and bought it from the other one. I mean, it was that simple. And so it actually protects everyone and provides better knowledge to the public.
I'm not sure I would compare bargaining to buying a car, but I mean, I can see there is benefit in having it open. If both sides are not working from a place of good faith, then it becomes a challenge. And when you got two different sources or two different news feeds coming out, it becomes a challenge. But anyway, go ahead.
Can I say one thing that ties in right into what he said? It's one second. They also said they had joint communications to inform staff and communities, and they agreed to that as part of their interest-based bargaining, that they weren't going to be both putting out conflicting information. They put out a joint communication that they agreed to.
That came with the interest-based bargaining.
That was one of their agreements.
Okay. So who decides whether it's open or closed bargaining? Is that something the board decides, or is that something how does that work? Does anybody know that answer?
It would have to be mutual agreement between the.
So it would have to be.
And the association.
Okay, and interest-based bargaining is the same?
Yes.
Okay, so we're talking about it on one level, and we would have to have an agreement on with both, okay? I think the culture of this whole district has changed. I've talked to lots of teachers who feel supported, who feel, and I feel like, now is there problems? I'm sure there's problems, but I think we're coming around to a more unified thing. I absolutely think we need to move toward one of the two. So, because really it's all about kids and doing what's best for kids. And what's best for kids to make sure our teachers are supported, and that they're getting the things that they need to be able to provide the services that they provide. And I think that can happen between one of those two, and there might be a third option out there. from what I've seen these last 2 years, I don't think we need to go back to that kind of bargaining. I think we need some changes. I hope that's what is felt on that end as well. But I want our relationship with the union to be one of support and collaboration and team building, because if we have that kind of positive interactions, then we are going to excel as a district. Our teachers are going to feel supported. They're going to be getting what they need. They're going to, and then we're going to have these relationships where they want to do their best because they're getting those needs filled, and we have this really positive bargaining. Everything I've learned at this thing is positive reaps positive, and negativity reaps negativity. So let's get to a positive place, and if that's interest-based bargaining, great. If it's open bargaining, great. And if it's Plan C, great. But I think we do need to make some changes.
So I agree. I support this interest-based bargaining, and it was presentation 104. If anybody is interested in looking at the highlights that they had from interest-based bargaining.
So I just want to make sure and I know we've talked about this before, but I don't remember everything I've heard. So, so interest-based bargaining, like open bargaining, would be something both sides agree on. Now, I think open bargaining is pretty clear because it's open and you're probably even recording and maybe even live streaming it. Interest-based bargaining, is each side's understanding, I mean, is there a definition of interest-based bargaining and each side understands that they're working off the same sheet of music?
There's a interest-based bargaining is it's a formal process, and if both sides agree to participate in interest-based bargaining, you go to a training together to learn how to facilitate that process, communicate, develop interests, and everyone has to agree to follow all of the same rules. And so you have a set of ground rules that are very specific and unique to that process. So it has to be a mutual agreement.
And at some point, let's say you're doing this. So it's interesting, I think Scott said that this district was doing it and then it kind of broke down and they went back to position bargain. Is that what you called it?
For a day or so.
Is that an option? I mean, is that like, you know what, we're tired of this and we're not getting what we want? And it just seems that
it just seems like we're renaming the same thing. I mean, this really doesn't address the issues that we've had. And what I go back to is the whole, what you mentioned, Mr. Christensen, about that if everyone's acting in good faith. Well, if we're truly acting in good faith, then there's no problem with open bargaining. The problem is individually, we don't always act in good faith. Probably all of us, we sometimes make mistakes, or we kind of want to not paint something the right way. We, say something that's not quite that everyone does that in ways that we don't think about. But if we're truly acting in good faith, then there's no issue with open bargaining. And these other types of bargaining, I feel, are just putting different names to essentially the similar type thing. It doesn't address any of the issues we've had in the past. The same struggles could eventually happen, even if you've gone to a training together and you're trying to do it differently.
I'm in favor. Again, I don't think, I think we need to trust our district representatives. We trust the union representatives that everybody's acting in good faith. And I personally have no issue with that. And I don't, going back to the car analogy, if I'm just buying a car and I just want transportation and a car is a car is a car is a car, give me a price and I'm done. But if I want, leather seats, I want upgraded floor mats, or I want the wheels, and these all come at a cost. So you guys are going to have to go figure out what you can afford. I'm going to figure out what I can afford, and I might throw some things out there that you're going to say, well, maybe we can do this, and it's a bargain. And as long as everybody's acting in good faith, maybe some people are willing to throw some things out there that are just crazy, and you go, whoa, who thought of that? But when those get recorded and somebody takes a little snippet of that and says, well, here's what the district said, or here's what the union said, and that, to me, I think we've got to trust people are going to do the right thing. Now, recognizing that things can always break down. That's when you wish that you'd gone back the other way. And I don't want to get down the stream and find out that, you know what, something's changed here. So that's why I'm curious on what the rules are of interest-based bargaining.
But I think if there's an agreement that they all come away every evening with the same
Message.
communication and the same message to the public or to whoever.
It's huge.
Is huge. I mean, I think that is the biggest misrepresentation for our last.
And I think, yeah, I mean, that's a challenge, and I don't want to throw anybody under the bus. I think we just have to look,
Right.
What happened.
Right.
We're going to look going forward. And I can tell you, so at our last legislative assembly, there was a lot of people frustrated with how their bargains were going. And there were some districts who stood up and said, ours go great. We have a great relationship with our union. I don't know why you guys even want this. And having been there 2 years earlier, I'm thinking, good for you. But not everybody lives in that world. So I understand there's some frustration. We've been there, we've experienced that. But I can tell you, when you get to the place where everybody's bargaining truly in good faith, it's got to feel good. I think another thing that I would say on this, and I think it's interesting, Scott, that you pointed this out, that UNISERV and district council, outside council, whoever it is, you take a back seat, and we work together from our community standpoint. These are the things that our teachers want. These are the things that our district feels like are most beneficial to us. So let's work together as a community team to get the best bargain for us, because I worry when we get these outside interests coming in that they can bring in things that don't necessarily benefit our community. So I think that's a great observation.
The thing is, somehow we have got to get to a point of a point of positivity, and I think that's critical. Anyway, if I go over any line, please wave at me. So
It's recorded, and
I know,
somebody's going to play it back.
I know, and I don't know how to not speak my mind, so here you go. But so maybe I need to learn to hold back a little bit more. But thank you, poke me. But but I just remember the things that the board wanted, and these goals that we were like, oh, we really want this. We think we need to provide more support in this area, and we saw what the union wanted, and I was shocked at how those matched and those married together, and I was surprised that the bargain didn't seem to go as well as that match and marrying to me seemed to be. So was that too much?
Well, no, I think that you're describing in essence what can be an interest-based collaborative process.
Anyways, so I looked at that and I'm like, I think we have a lot of the same goals. Why can't we make this a positive thing? We want our teachers to feel supported. We want them to feel like they have the tools that they need to do the job that they have. We want to make sure that we have competitive pay in the area so we're not losing teachers. We don't want our teachers to go somewhere else. We want all of these things. I think now did I go too far? A little. Anyway, I just think we're there. And I think whatever we do, we need to do something. And we need to get to that point. And so I think action needs to happen, and I hope that we can do that. So sorry if I said too much.
Anybody else have anything to say on bargaining? All right, thank you for joining us this evening. I think it was a very beneficial conversation, and then I'd remind each board member that we talked about things tonight. Miss Whitney gleaned things from our discussion here, and we have whoever our next board officers are. We have board elections, board reorganization, we call it, at our next board meeting. When those board officers come out of that meeting, it'll be their responsibility, along with Miss Whitney, to take this type of information and incorporate it into our board schedule. And if there's something that we discussed tonight that doesn't get onto the board agenda and you're not a board officer, ensure that you continue to talk to your board officers and Ms. Whitney to get it on the agenda. Thank you for joining us.